My fingers trembled at the top button of my blouse, my heartbeat a wild rhythm I couldn't control. I'd walked into his office expecting a job interview, not this electric silence that made my skin prickle with awareness. His eyes never left mine as he waited, patient and unreadable, the power dynamic between us shifting with each second that passed. "Why?" I managed to ask, my voice barely audible even to myself. "Because I need to know who you really are," he said, leaning forward slightly. "And whether you can handle what this position requires." He paused, his expression impossible to interpret. Then, "Do you trust me, Olivia?" The strange part wasn't his request, it was how desperately I wanted to comply. How something deep inside recognized a truth I wasn't ready to admit. Trust him. I'd known Adrian Wolfe for exactly 27 minutes. The office suddenly felt too warm, too small. Floor-to-ceiling windows displayed Manhattan in all its afternoon glory, but I felt completely removed from that reality suspended in this moment where everything could change. "Mr. Wolfe, Adrian," he corrected, the faintest smile touching his lips. "If we're going to work together, I prefer Adrian." If such a small word with such enormous weight, I should have walked out, should have gathered my portfolio, straightened my pencil skirt, and marched toward the elevator with whatever dignity I could salvage. That's what a woman with self-respect would do. That's what the version of me from 6 months ago would have done. But 6 months ago, I hadn't been desperate. 6 months ago, I hadn't been fired from the publishing house where I'd worked for 3 years after refusing my boss's advances. 6 months ago, I hadn't discovered how quickly a reputation could be destroyed by whispers and innuendo. 6 months ago, I hadn't been eating ramen for dinner 4 nights a week because my savings were nearly depleted. Adrian Wolfe represented my last, best chance at salvaging my career. His literary agency was the most prestigious in the city. An executive assistant position with him would open doors I thought had been permanently closed, but at what cost? "I don't understand what undressing has to do with being your assistant," I said finally, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. He nodded, as if I'd passed some test. "A fair question." He stood, buttoning his suit jacket in one fluid motion. He moved to the window, his back to me. "I need someone who won't be intimidated. By me, by my clients, by difficult situations. Someone who understands boundaries, both respecting them and establishing their own." He turned back. "I'm not asking you to strip naked, Olivia. I'm asking if you're willing to be vulnerable, to step outside convention when necessary, to trust your instincts even when they conflict with expectations." I swallowed hard. Most employers determine that with behavioral interview questions. A laugh escaped him, genuine, unexpected. It transformed his face completely, softening the hard edges. Not most employers. No, he certainly wasn't. Adrian Wolfe had built his agency from nothing into a powerhouse in less than a decade. His clients included best-selling authors, celebrities, and politicians. The rumors about his methods were as numerous as they were unverifiable. The only consistent thread was that he operated by his own rules. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" I needed clarity. Needed to understand what game we were playing. He returned to his desk, reclaiming his seat across from me. "Remove your jacket. Unbutton your blouse just enough to make you uncomfortable, not enough to be inappropriate. Then tell me something true about yourself that isn't on your resume." My hand went instinctively to my throat. "And if I refuse, then you're not right for this position, and we both just saved a considerable amount of time." His tone wasn't threatening or disappointed, just matter of fact. I thought about my empty refrigerator, about the past due notice on my utility bill, about the humiliation of moving back to my parents' house in Ohio if I couldn't make it work here. But more than that, I thought about how tired I was of playing by rules that seemed designed for me to lose. "One more question," I said. "Would you ask a male candidate to do this?" His expression remained unchanged. Yes, and many have walked out. Others have completed the exercise and failed in different ways. A few have succeeded. I nodded, decision made. My fingers moved to the buttons of my cream-colored blouse, .1, .2, .3. I stopped, feeling exposed but not indecent. The lace edge of my brow was visible, nothing more. Something true, I said, meeting his gaze directly. I'm terrified right now, but not of you. I'm afraid of what it says about me that I'm willing to do this. His eyes never left mine, never dropped to the exposed skin at my collarbone or the shadow between my breasts. Thank you for your honesty, Olivia. You can button your blouse. As I did, a strange sense of power replaced my vulnerability. I had chosen this. No one had forced me. Did I pass your test? I asked when I was composed again. That depends, he said, sliding a folder across the desk toward me, on whether you want the job after you read what it actually entails. The contract in my hands wasn't like any employment agreement I'd ever seen. Personal executive assistant, I read aloud, my eyes scanning the first page. The salary figure made me blink twice to ensure I wasn't hallucinating. It was nearly triple what I'd made at the publishing house. Too much? Adrian asked, watching me closely. For an assistant position? Yes. I looked up from the paper. What aren't you telling me? He leaned back in his chair. Keep reading. I turned the page. Standard confidentiality clauses, health benefits, vacation time, all generous but not unusual. Then I reached section 5, unique position requirements. 5.1 employee will serve as personal executive. Assistant to Adrian Wolf in all professional and selected personal matters. 5.2. Position requires 24-hour availability via secure messaging system. Employee will be compensated for all after-hours work at standard overtime rates. 5.3. Employee will accompany employer to all business functions, dinners, and events as required. 5.4. Employee acknowledges that this position may require comfort with unconventional situations and interactions with high-profile individuals. 5.5. Employee agrees to maintain physical appearance standards appropriate to high-level business settings. 5.6. The relationship between employee and employer will remain strictly professional. Any violation of this boundary by either party constitutes immediate grounds for termination. I reread that last clause twice, heat creeping up my neck. You seem surprised by 5.6, Adrian observed. I just ... I cleared my throat. Given how this interview started, it seems contradictory. On the contrary. He leaned forward, elbows on his desk. It's precisely because this position requires unusual levels of trust and comfort that we need absolute clarity about boundaries. My methods may be unconventional, but they're never inappropriate. I nodded slowly, continuing to read. The next section detailed a communication system involving color codes. Green meant everything was fine. Yellow indicated discomfort that needed discussion. Red signaled an immediate stop to whatever was happening. This reads like, I trailed off, unsure how to finish that sentence without sounding ridiculous. Like a BDSM contract? Adrian supplied, his expression neutral. The parallel isn't coincidental. Those communities have developed excellent protocols for consent and communication. I've adopted them for professional use. I felt my cheeks flush. I don't have experience with. I'm not asking if you do, he interrupted gently. I'm explaining that this position involves complex power dynamics and situations where clear communication is essential. The system works. I turned to the final page, which contained a blank space labeled personal boundaries and non-negotiables. What goes here? I asked. Your terms, Adrian said simply. Things you will not do under any circumstances. Lines you will not cross. Once documented, I will never ask you to violate them. My mind raced. This was so far beyond a normal job. Yet something about him, made me want to say yes despite all rational objections. Can I have some time to think about this? I asked. Of course. He slid a pen across the desk. Write your boundaries now. Take the contract home. If you decide to accept, come back tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. ready to start. If not, no explanation necessary. I picked up the pen, hesitating only briefly before writing. 1. No sexual contact or romantic involvement of any kind. 2. No illegal activities. 3. No public humiliation. 4. I maintain the right to say no to any request without repercussion. 5. Party may terminate this agreement with 2 weeks' notice. I paused, then added one more line. 6. Complete honesty from both parties at all times. I slid the paper back. Adrian read my additions without comment, then nodded once. Any questions before? You go? He asked. 1,000. But only one seemed important in the moment. Why me? My background is in publishing, not as an executive assistant. Because when I asked you to undress, you negotiated rather than simply complying or fleeing, he said. Because you asked if I would make the same request of a man. Because you were honest about your fear. He smiled slightly. And because your experience in publishing will be valuable with my clients. I gathered my portfolio and stood. 8 a.m. tomorrow, then, if I decide yes. If, he agreed. Oh, and Olivia? I paused at the door, yellow or red at any time. No questions. Ask no consequences. That's a promise. As I rode the elevator down 62 floors, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just been offered more than a job. I'd been offered an initiation into a world I didn't fully understand. The question was whether I was brave enough or foolish enough to accept it. I arrived at 7:45 a.m. Contract signed and tucked into my new leather portfolio, a small splurge to mark the occasion. The night had been sleepless, filled with alternating waves of excitement and dread. By dawn, I'd convinced myself this was either the best or worst decision of my life, with no middle ground possible. The receptionist, Diane, according to the nameplate on her desk, looked up as I approached. You must be Olivia, she said with a knowing smile. Adrian said you'd be starting today. He'd been that confident I'd accept. The realization both irritated and flattered me. He's waiting for you, Diane continued, handing me a security badge. 62nd floor. His office is at the end of the hall. The elevator felt different this morning. Yesterday, I'd been one of many applicants. Today, I belonged at least provisionally. The weight of the decision settled in my stomach like a stone as I watched the numbers climb. Adrian was standing at the window when I entered, his back to the door. The morning light silhouetted his tall frame, casting him in dramatic relief against the city skyline. He turned as the door clicked shut behind me. You came, not a question. Not quite surprised either. I did. I held up the signed contract, though I'm still not entirely sure why. He crossed the room and took the document, scanning my signature before meeting my eyes. Curiosity, ambition, financial necessity, all valid reasons. And completely transparent to you, apparently. A slight smile. Not completely. You're here earlier than required. That suggests enthusiasm or anxiety. Possibly both. I shifted uncomfortably under his scrutiny. Are all our interactions going to involve you analyzing me? Likely. He set the contract aside. Does that make you uncomfortable? Yellow, I said, testing the system immediately. His demeanor changed subtly, less intensity, more openness. Thank you for using the code. What specifically feels uncomfortable? The power imbalance, I admitted. You knowing more about me than I know about you. He nodded. Fair point. What would you like to know? The directness of his response caught me off guard. I'd expected deflection or a reminder of the professional boundaries. Instead, he waited, genuinely ready to answer whatever I might ask. Why this system? The codes, the unusual interview method, what made you develop it? Something flickered across his face, an old pain quickly masked. Experience, he said simply. Both professional and personal. I've seen what happens when communication fails. In high-pressure situations, he gestured toward the door. Let me show you your office. We crossed the hall to a smaller but equally impressive space. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered the same spectacular view. A sleek desk held a state-of-the-art computer, tablet, and phone system. A small seating area with a sofa and coffee table occupied one corner. This is mine. I couldn't keep the surprise. From my voice, you'll spend significant time here. It should be comfortable. He moved to the desk, indicating a small silver object beside the computer. This is your direct line to me. Press once for routine matters, twice for urgent issues, 3 times for emergencies. I picked it up, examining the simple button device. And if you need me, I'll message first. If it's urgent, I'll use this. He held up a matching device. 1 press means come when convenient. 2 means as soon as possible. 3 means drop everything. Very James Bond. I observed. Practical, he corrected. It reduces interruptions and miscommunications. A sleek cabinet stood against one wall. Adrian opened it to reveal women's clothing suits, dresses, blouses, even shoes. What's this? I asked, approaching cautiously. Your work wardrobe, Section 5.5 of the contract. I ran my fingers along a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I have clothes. You have clothing appropriate for a publishing house? This position requires something different. He must have seen my expression because he added, green, yellow, or red, Olivia. I considered. The clothes were beautiful. Professional but stylish. Nothing revealing or inappropriate. Green, I decided. But I reserve the right to wear my own clothes sometimes. Noted. He checked his watch. We have a meeting in 30 minutes with Serena James. My eyes widened. Serena James was a literary phenomenon. Her debut novel had spent 47 weeks on the bestseller list. The Serena James. She's having doubts about the direction of her second book. You're publishing. Background might provide valuable perspective. He handed me a tablet. Her manuscript is loaded here. Read as much as you can before she arrives. You want my opinion on Serena James's unpublished manuscript? On my first day? Is that a problem? He asked, his expression unreadable. No, it's just ... I searched for the right words. Unexpected. Get used to unexpected, Olivia. It's the standard here. He moved toward the door. One more thing. When we're with clients, watch my signals. 1 finger tap means speak freely. 2 means observe only. The next hours passed in a blur. Serena James arrived younger than I expected, nervous in a way her public persona never revealed. Adrian introduced me simply as Olivia, my assistant, but treated my opinions with the same weight as his own. When Serena left, visibly relieved after Adrian's guidance on restructuring her narrative, he turned to me. Your thoughts? On the manuscript or the meeting? Both, I considered carefully. Her writing is excellent, but she's overthinking the structure. The meeting. I hesitated. Complete honesty, he reminded me, echoing item 6 from my contract editions. You were kind to her, I said. Different than you are with me, gentler. She needed gentleness. You don't. The assessment was so matter-of-fact that I couldn't even be offended. And what do I need, according to your analysis? Challenge, he said without hesitation. Structure with space for autonomy, clear expectations with room to exceed them. Before I could respond, his phone chimed. He glanced at it, expression hardening. Change of plans. We're having dinner with Malcolm Reed tonight. I recognized the name immediately. Reed was a notoriously difficult author whose political thrillers sold millions despite his reputation. For being impossible to work with? Should I prepare somehow? I asked. Yes. Go home and change into something formal. I'll send a car at 7. He was already moving toward his office, attention shifting to the next task. Adrian, I called after. Him. He paused, looking back. What color code applies when I'm not sure how I feel about something? The question seemed to interest him. Yellow is appropriate for uncertainty. Or green with a verbal qualifier. I nodded. Green with uncertainty, then. About tonight. Noted, he said. Malcolm Reed can be challenging, but remember, he held my gaze with unexpected intensity. You don't work for him. You work for me. As I gathered my things to leave, I realized I'd experienced more in one day with Adrian Wolfe than in months at my previous job. The question was whether I could maintain the pace and what it would cost me if I did. The car arrived precisely at 7:00. Sleek black sedan with a silent driver who opened the door without meeting my eyes. I'd spent 2 hours deliberating over what formal meant in this context, finally settling on a simple black dress I'd worn to a college friend's wedding. It felt inadequate the moment I slid into the leatherback seat. Adrian was waiting outside. Elysium, one of those exclusive Manhattan restaurants without a sign. He wore a tuxedo with such natural ease that I immediately regretted my choice. Too late now. You look lovely, he said, offering his arm. The compliment seemed perfunctory, professional reassurance rather than flirtation. I'm underdressed, I replied, taking his arm hesitantly. You're perfect for what we need tonight. He guided me through the door, where the mater d' greeted him by name. Malcolm responds better to understated elegance than obvious display. Inside, the restaurant was all dim lighting and hushed conversations. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables spaced far enough apart for privacy. Money whispered here rather than shouted. Malcolm Reed was already seated, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. He stood as we approached, a courtesy I hadn't expected from a man with his reputation, Adrian. His handshake was brief. And who is this? Olivia Chun, my new executive assistant. Adrian's hand settled at the small of my back, guiding me into the seat beside his. The touch was proprietary, but not inappropriate. A silent message to Reed that I was under Adrian's protection. Replacing Jason already, Reed raised an eyebrow, signaling for the waiter. That was quick. Jason moved to our London office last month, as you know. Adrian's tone remained pleasant, but I sensed tension beneath it. Olivia comes from the publishing side, Horizon Books. Reed's gaze sharpened, suddenly more interested. Caldwell's house? You worked for that pompous ass? I felt Adrian's subtle finger tap against the table. One tap speak freely. I did. I confirmed until recently. And now you're with Adrian. Reed's smile didn't reach his eyes. Quite the career change. A lateral move with better company, I said. Matching his smile with one equally artificial, Reed laughed a genuine sound. That transformed his face. I like her, Adrian. More spine than the last one. The waiter arrived, and Adrian ordered for all of us without consultation, a move that would normally irritate me. Tonight, it felt like a shield dot as the evening progressed. I began to understand my role. Adrian and Reed discussed his upcoming book, a thriller involving political corruption and assassination. Reed was hesitant about a pivotal scene, and Adrian suggested an alternative approach. It undermines the character's motivation, Reed argued, gesturing with his third scotch. Roberts wouldn't risk exposure without certainty. Unless his hand was forced, Adrian countered. Which it would be if Thompson moved the timeline. Reed turned to me unexpectedly. What do you think, Miss Chen? You've been very quiet. Adrian's finger tapped twice, observe only. But Reed was staring at me, expecting a response. I glanced at Adrian, whose expression revealed nothing. I'd only heard fragments of the plot, Mr. Reed. Malcolm, please. He leaned forward. And I'm asking for your fresh perspective. Does a man sacrifice principles for expediency if lives are at stake? A trap, cleverly disguised as a hypothetical. I felt Adrian tense beside me, but kept my focus on Reed. That depends on whose lives and which principles, I said carefully. But in my experience, people rarely act against their nature, even in extraordinary circumstances. They just reveal what was always there beneath the surface. Reed sat back, a flicker of genuine respect crossing his features. Well said. He drained his glass. Adrian, she's wasted as an assistant. Adrian's hand moved to my knee under the table, not a caress, but a warning. Olivia's position is precisely what we both want it to be. The possessive pronoun wasn't lost on Reed, whose smile turned knowing. Of course. He checked his watch. I should go. Early flight tomorrow. After settling the bill, which I couldn't see but imagined was astronomical, Adrian escorted Reed outside. They spoke briefly while I waited, their conversation intense but inaudible. The drive back to my apartment was silent until we were halfway there. You handled that well, Adrian said finally. Did I? You signaled me not to speak, but he asked directly. You navigated a difficult situation gracefully. That's the job. I turned to face him in the dim car interior. What was that comment about? About my position being what we both want it to be. Adrian's expression remained neutral. Malcolm was making assumptions about our relationship. I corrected him without embarrassing him. By implying there is a relationship. By implying it's not his business either way. His gaze was steady. Does that bother you? I thought about it honestly. Yellow. Not because of what you said, but because I'm not sure what my role actually is. In moments like that, am I your assistant, your colleague, or ... something else? All of the above, depending on the context. He shifted to face me more directly. This position exists in the spaces between defined roles. That's what makes it challenging and valuable. The car stopped outside my building. Adrian made no move to exit, but the driver immediately came around to open my door. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., Adrian said. We'll discuss the Reed situation further. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. As I stepped out, he added, Olivia? I turned back. You were perfect tonight. Exactly what was needed. The praise shouldn't have warmed me the way it did. The next morning, I found Adrian in my office rather than his own, examining a document at my desk. He looked up as I entered. Good morning, he said, setting the paper aside. Sleep well? Not. Really, I set my bag down. I kept replaying last night, wondering what I missed. Perceptive. He indicated that I should sit. Malcolm Reed is testing boundaries, mine, yours, everyone's. It's what he does, I noticed. What you may not have noticed is that he offered you a job last night. Indirectly, I blinked in surprise. He did? Wasted as an assistant was his way of expressing interest. Adrian's expression remained neutral. He's looking for an editor. He can manipulate. He thinks you might be suitable. But single quotes, flattering, I suppose. It's problematic, Adrian corrected. Malcolm has a history of inappropriate relationships with female employees. It rarely ends well for them. I stiffened. Are you warning me away from a potential opportunity? I'm providing context for a situation you'll likely face again. He leaned forward. Malcolm will continue to test boundaries when we interact with him. I need to know where yours are. My contract already states, not contractual boundaries, personal ones. His gaze was intense. What specifically made you uncomfortable last night? The directness of the question caught me off guard. I considered. Deflecting, but remembered our agreement, complete honesty. The way you put your hand on my knee under the table, I admitted. It felt ... intimate. It was a warning signal, he explained. Similar to the finger taps. I should have clarified that protocol in advance. There are other ways to signal someone. You're right. No defensiveness, just acknowledgement. Red or yellow? Yellow. I understand the intention now, but I prefer verbal or visual cues that don't involve touching. He nodded once. Established. Anything else? I hesitated, then decided to push further. The implication to read that there might be something between us beyond a professional relationship. Adrian's expression didn't change. That was strategic. Men like Malcolm respect territory more than boundaries. Suggesting you're off limits because of professional ethics wouldn't deter him. Suggesting you're off limits because of personal connection might. So you lied. I allowed him to maintain his assumption without confirming or denying it. Adrian stood. You find that manipulative, not a question. An observation. I find it complicated. I corrected. And I'd appreciate being consulted before such strategies are employed. He studied me for a long moment. You're right. I apologize. The simple admission surprised me. I'd expected justification or dismissal. Thank you, I said, uncertain how to respond to his directness. We have a meeting with Catherine Diaz at 11, he continued, moving toward the door. She's considering U.S. for representation. Her work is exceptional, but commercially challenging. I'd like your perspective on potential positioning. Just like that, we were back to business. The boundary had been established, acknowledged, and respected without drama or lingering tension. It was the most mature handling of a workplace issue I'd ever experienced. As I prepared for the meeting, I realized something unsettling. I was beginning to understand Adrian's system. More disturbingly, I was beginning to appreciate it. 3 weeks into my new position, and I developed a rhythm. Mornings were for administrative tasks, emails, scheduling, preparing briefs on clients and projects. Afternoons often involved meetings, sometimes with Adrian, sometimes on my own with junior authors or industry contacts. Evenings occasionally stretched into dinner meetings or events, but Adrian was careful to keep those to a minimum. The color code system had become second nature. Green dominated most days, with occasional yellows when a situation required clarification. I hadn't used red once, though Adrian had during a tense negotiation with a film producer who tried to bully one of our authors into unfavorable terms. It was nearly 9 on a Thursday evening when my direct line chimed. 3 presses emergency. I was already in pajamas, hair damp from the shower, but I didn't hesitate. I changed quickly, ordered a ride, and was at the office within 30 minutes. Adrian's door was closed. I knocked once and entered without. Waiting for a response, the protocol for emergency summons. He was at the window, silhouetted against the night skyline, a glass of what looked like whiskey in his hand. He didn't turn immediately. Adrian? When he finally faced me, I was shocked by his appearance. His tie was loosened, collar unbuttoned, hair slightly disheveled, small details that on anyone else would be unremarkable. On Adrian, they were alarm bells. What's happened? I asked, closing the door behind me. Serena James attempted suicide this evening. The words hit like a physical blow. Is she alive? He confirmed. Her assistant found her in time. She's at Mount Sinai. I moved closer, uncertain what he needed from me. Should we go there? Is there something we can do? Her family's with her. I've arranged for the best psychiatric care. He set his glass down on the desk with careful precision. I spoke with her yesterday. She seemed better, more confident about the revisions. Understanding dawned. You think? You missed something. His expression tightened. I know I missed something. Adrian, you couldn't have. Don't. The word was sharp. Don't offer hollow reassurances. I fell silent, watching him. After a moment, he sighed. I apologize. That was unfair. It was honest, I countered. I prefer that to politeness. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. One of your better qualities. He gestured to the seating area. Sit with me. We settled onto the leather sofa, a careful distance between us. Adrian rarely allowed himself this kind of vulnerability. I wasn't sure how to navigate it. I've known Serena since she was 22, he said finally, before her first novel, before the fame. She's always been fragile, brilliant but delicate. The manuscript was exceptional, he finished, but the pressure of following such massive success, double quotes, he shook his head. I should have seen the signs. What would you have done differently? I asked. If you had seen them? The question seemed to catch him off guard. He considered it seriously. I don't know, he admitted finally. That's the problem, isn't it? We think if we just pay close enough attention, we can prevent disasters. But sometimes He trailed off. Sometimes people break despite our best efforts, I finished quietly. He looked at me then, really looked at me, as if seeing something new. Yes, we sat in silence for several minutes. It should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. I lost a client once, he said eventually, voice low. Before the agency was established, Thomas Riley, brilliant poet, troubled man. He'd been sober for years when I started working with him. His collection was shortlisted for the National Book Award. I remained silent, sensing he needed to speak without interruption. The pressure was immense. He started drinking again. Small amounts at first, then more. I saw it happening, but told myself it was temporary, that he could handle it. Adrian's fingers tightened around his empty glass. He died in a hotel room in Boston. Alcohol poisoning. I'm sorry, I said softly. I established the color code system after that. Not just for my assistants, for everyone I work with. Clear communication, especially about discomfort or danger. He set the glass aside. It saved lives since then. Just not tonight. The confession was so unexpected, so human, that I acted without thinking. I reached across the space between us and covered his hand with mine. Serena is alive, I reminded him. Because her assistant found her in time. Because you taught people to pay attention. He looked down at our hands, then back to my face. Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a momentary surrender of the control he maintained so rigidly. Thank you for coming tonight, he said. It wasn't actually an emergency in the professional sense. What color would you assign to this situation? I asked, gently withdrawing my hand. He considered, yellow bordering on red. Personally, not professionally. He stood abruptly. I shouldn't have called you here for this. I'm glad you did, I said, rising as well. Isn't that the point of the system? To use it when needed. The system is for work, he said, but without conviction. And this is just work? I challenged, surprising myself with my boldness. 3 weeks ago, you told me this position exists, in the spaces between defined roles. He went still, studying me with that intense focus I'd come to recognize. Using my words against me, Olivia, with you, I corrected. There's a difference. The ghost of a smile returned. Indeed there is. He checked his watch. It's late. I'll have the car take you home. As we walked to the elevator, he asked, would you be willing to visit Serena tomorrow? Not as my assistant, but as someone who understands her work. She respects your opinion. Of course, I said. Whatever helps. The elevator arrived, doors sliding open silently. Before I stepped in, Adrian said, Olivia? I turned back. Green or yellow, how would you categorize tonight's interaction? I considered carefully, green with uncertainty. He nodded once, precisely. As the elevator descended, I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. The lines were blurring, and I wasn't entirely sure how I felt about that. What I did know was that tonight, I'd seen beneath Adrian Wolfe's carefully constructed persona, and instead of being disappointed, I was intrigued. Maybe that should have scared me more than it did. Serena James recovered slowly but steadily. My visits became regular twice weekly at first, then weekly as she improved. Adrian never accompanied me, which seemed to be by design rather than coincidence. During one visit, Serena confirmed my suspicion. He blames himself, she said, tucking her legs beneath her on the hospital armchair. The private room was filled with flowers and books, making it feel less institutional. It's ridiculous, of course. My demons aren't his responsibility. He feels differently, I replied, careful not to betray Adrian's confidence. She studied me with unexpected shrewdness. You're different than his previous assistants. How so? You push back. A small smile curved her lips. I've known Adrian for 5 years. I've watched him go through 4 assistants before you. They were all competent, professional, deferential. And I'm not, I asked, unsure whether to be offended. Oh, you're competent and professional, she clarified. But definitely not deferential. It's refreshing. He needs someone who challenges him. I changed the subject, uncomfortable with her assessment. Yet her words lingered, echoing in my mind during the cab ride back to the office stopped 4 weeks after the incident. Adrian informed me we would be attending the National Book Awards gala that evening. Formal attire, he said, sliding an envelope across my desk. The car will pick you up at 7. I opened the envelope to find a credit card in my name. What's this? For your dress. Whatever you choose. He was already moving toward the door. Consider it a company expense. Adrian, my tone stopped him. I have dresses. He turned back, expression neutral. This is a high-profile industry event. The appropriate attire is... I understand that, I interrupted. But giving me a credit card without discussion feels ... problematic. He considered this. Yellow? Yellow, I confirmed. I apologize, he said without hesitation. The card is an option, not an obligation. If you're comfortable with your existing formal wear, that's your choice. The easy capitulation surprised me. Thank you. He nodded once and left. I stared at the credit card, turning it over in my hands. The gesture wasn't entirely inappropriate. Many executives provided such allowances for staff attending major events. Yet something about it bothered me. Not enough, apparently, to prevent me from using it that afternoon. The black silk gown I selected was more daring than my usual style, open-backed with a subtle side slit, but still professional and elegant. I justified the purchase as an investment in my career, ignoring the small voice that whispered I was. Trying to impress Adrian Dot when the car arrived that evening, I was ready. The driver handed me an envelope containing my ticket and a note from Adrian. Meeting you there. Look for me near the Eastern Bar Dot. The venue was spectacular, a historic hall transformed with dramatic lighting and floral arrangements. Hundreds of publishing industry elites mingled in their finest attire. The air electric with competition and ambition poorly disguised as collegial celebration. I spotted Adrian immediately. He stood slightly apart from the crowd, observing rather, than participating. The tuxedo emphasized his height and lean build, the severe black and white somehow softening the sharp angles of his face. He hadn't seen me yet, and for a moment, I simply watched him, the subtle confidence in his posture, the careful distance he maintained from those around him. When he finally noticed me, something flickered across his features, surprise, perhaps, or appreciation. He crossed the space between us with deliberate steps. You look stunning, he said simply. Thank you. I resisted the urge to fidget under his gaze. So do you. A waiter passed with champagne flutes. Adrian took 2, offering one to me. Nervous? Should I be? Tonight is politics disguised as celebration, he said, scanning the room. Everyone watching everyone else, measuring influence and connection. Sounds exhausting. It can be. He sipped his champagne. Stay close. There are people here you should meet and others you should avoid. The evening unfolded like a complex dance. Adrian guided me through introductions, his hand occasionally touching my back to direct me through the crowd. Each contact was brief, professional, yet I remained acutely aware of the warmth of his palm against the bare skin of my back. We were speaking with a senior editor from a major publishing house when I noticed Adrian tense slightly. Following his gaze, I saw a woman approaching, elegant, silver-haired, with a predatory smile. "Adrian," she said warmly, air kissing near his cheek. "How lovely to see you. Margot." His tone was cordial but guarded. "Congratulations on the Pulitzer finalist." "Thank you, darling." Her gaze shifted to me, assessing in a single sweep. "And who is this?" "Olivia Chen, my executive assistant." Adrian's introduction was smooth. "Olivia, Margot Hayes, publisher, at Athena Press." Recognition clicked immediately. Margot Hayes was a legend in publishing, brilliant, ruthless, and formerly married to Adrian. The divorce had been finalized just before he founded his agency. "Charmed," she said, not sounding it at all. Adrian always did have excellent taste in assistants. The implication hung in the air, deliberately provocative. Adrian's expression remained neutral. "Miss Hayes's memoir of the publishing industry is required reading for anyone serious about the business," I said, keeping my tone professional. "Your chapter on predatory contracts was particularly illuminating." Surprise flickered across her face before she laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her features. "Oh, I like this one, Adrian," she bites back. "Olivia speaks for herself," he replied. "One of her many valuable qualities." Margot's gaze shifted between us, calculating. "Well, I won't keep you. Do send my regards to Serena." Such a terrible business. After she departed, I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. That was Margot being Margot, Adrian. Finished. She tests boundaries as a hobby. "You were married to her." "For 3 years, a lifetime ago." He guided me toward a quieter corner. "She taught me a great deal about power dynamics. Not all of it pleasant." Before I could respond, the announcement came for everyone to take their seats for dinner and the award ceremony. Our table included several of Adrian's clients and 2 senior editors from major houses' strategic placement. That kept us engaged in industry conversation throughout the meal. The awards themselves were predictably political, with a few genuine surprises. Adrian's expression rarely changed, though I noticed his slight smile when Catherine Diaz, our newest client, won for Best Debut. As the formal proceedings ended and the event transitioned to mingling and dancing. Adrian leaned close. "Would you like to leave?" The proximity of his voice near my ear sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. "Do we need to stay longer? We've accomplished what we came for." "The rest is optional," I considered. The evening had been stimulating but exhausting. "Let's go." Outside, the late spring air was cool and refreshing after the crowded hall. Adrian's driver wasn't due for another 30 minutes. "Walk with me?" Adrian suggested, gesturing toward the nearby park. "It's a beautiful night." We strolled in comfortable silence, the sounds of the gala fading behind us. The park was well lit and still populated with evening visitors, but felt worlds away from the intensity of the event. "You handled Margot well," Adrian said finally. "Most people either cower or overcompensate." "She was marking territory," I observed, "testing whether I knew about your history." "Yes." He glanced at me. "Does it bother you?" Working for someone with my reputation? The question surprised me. "What reputation is that, exactly?" "Controlling, difficult, cold." His tone was matter-of-fact, among other things. "You've never been cold with me," I said truthfully. "Demanding, yes, exacting, but not cold." He stopped walking, turning to face me directly. The park lighting cast half his face in shadow, the other half illuminated in soft gold. "What would you call it, then?" The question felt loaded, dangerous, contained, I decided. "Like there's something powerful you keep carefully controlled?" Something shifted in his expression, a momentary vulnerability quickly masked. Perceptive, he murmured. We stood there, the space between us charged with unspoken possibility. For one breathless moment, I thought he might close that distance. Instead, he took a deliberate step back. The car should be arriving. The drive to my apartment was silent, each of us lost in private thoughts. When we arrived, Adrian walked me to my door, something he'd never done before. "Thank you for tonight," he said formally. "You were an asset to the agency. Is that all I was?" The words escaped before I could reconsider them. Adrian went very still. "What else would you like to have been?" The question hung between us, an invitation and a warning simultaneously. I knew what answer I wanted to give, had known it for weeks, perhaps. But the consequences of honesty in this moment felt overwhelming. "I don't know," I said finally. "That's what scares me." His expression softened infinitesimally. "Olivia, green or yellow?" I interrupted. He hesitated, clearly understanding what I was asking. "Yellow." I nodded, a curious mix of relief and disappointment flooding through me. "Then good night, Adrian." "Good night," he replied, waiting until I was safely inside before turning away. I leaned against my closed door, heart racing. The evening had shifted something fundamental between us, acknowledged. What had been building since that first unusual interview? The question now was whether we would step back from that edge or deliberately cross it, and I wasn't entirely sure which outcome I was hoping for. 3 days passed without mention of that moment outside my apartment. We maintained our professional rhythm, though I caught Adrian watching me sometimes when he thought I wouldn't notice. The awareness between use had intensified, charging even routine interactions with unspoken tension. On Thursday afternoon, Adrian called me into his office. He stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, his thinking position I'd come to recognize. "Close the door, please," he said without turning. I did as requested, stomach tightening with apprehension. "Is something wrong?" "No," he finally faced me, "but we need to discuss what happened Monday night." So much for professional detachment. I straightened my shoulders, determined to maintain composure. "Which part specifically?" "You know which part." His gaze was steady, penetrating. The moment when our professional relationship nearly became something else. The directness was both startling and oddly reassuring. No games, no pretense. "Yes," I acknowledged. "That moment. I need to be clear about something." He moved toward his desk but didn't sit. "I am attracted to you, Olivia. I have been since our first meeting." My breath caught. Despite suspecting as much, hearing him say it aloud sent a shiver through me. "However," he continued, "I value our professional relationship too much to risk it without careful consideration, and I respect you too much to pretend this is simple." "It's not simple," I agreed quietly. "No." He studied me carefully. "The power dynamic between us makes any personal relationship inherently complicated. I'm your employer. There are ethical considerations." "I understand that. Do you?" His tone sharpened slightly. "Because I've seen how these situations typically unfold, Olivia. The initial excitement, the inevitable complications, the messy ending that destroys both the personal and professional connection. Is that what you assume would happen with us?" I challenged. "I assume nothing. I assess probabilities." He paused, and I take calculated risks only when the potential benefit outweighs the potential harm. That sounds very clinical. "It's honest." He sighed, a rare show of uncertainty. "I don't want to lose you as my assistant. You're exceptional at this role. But," I prompted, sensing there was more. "But I find myself distracted, wondering about possibilities." His expression remained controlled, but his eyes revealed more. "It's becoming inefficient." The technical framing almost made me smile. Only Adrian would approach attraction as an efficiency problem. "What are you suggesting?" I asked. He opened his desk drawer and removed a small box, placing it between us, a modification to our existing agreement. I made no move to touch it. What kind of modification? Open it, he said simply, and said the box was a business card. One word was printed in the center, pine. Pine? I turned the card over, but the reverse was blank. A safe word, Adrian explained. Different from our color code system, which applies to professional situations. This would be ... personal. Understanding dawned slowly. You're suggesting we explore a relationship outside work hours? I'm suggesting we acknowledge what's happening between us and establish clear parameters. He took the card from my hand. If either of us says this word, everything stops immediately. No questions, no consequences. Why pine? It's neutral, easy to remember, and unlikely to come up in normal conversation. He placed the card back in the box. It would apply anywhere, anytime, not just in intimate situations. The clinical precision of his approach should have dampened the moment. Instead, I found it oddly touching, his attempt to create safety within complexity. And what exactly are you proposing we do? I asked, needing absolute clarity. Tonight, dinner at my place. Not as your boss, not as your colleague. Just Adrian and Olivia, seeing if there's something worth exploring. I considered his offer, weighing desire against practicality. And tomorrow? We just come back to work. As if nothing's changed. That would depend on tonight, wouldn't it? For the first time, a hint of vulnerability showed through his composed exterior. What about my contract? Section 5.6 specifically prohibits personal relationships. Contracts can be amended, he said simply, if both parties agree. I took a deep breath, trying to think clearly despite the pounding of my heart. What if it doesn't work out? Then we acknowledge it, maintain professional boundaries, and continue our working relationship. Or if that proves impossible, I help. You find an equivalent position elsewhere. He was direct, pragmatic. I won't hold your career hostage to personal matters, Olivia. That's a promise. The thoroughness of his consideration was reassuring, yet something still felt unresolved. Why now? What changed? He hesitated, then answered with unexpected candor. Serena's situation reminded me that life is unpredictable. Opportunities don't always wait for perfect timing. I nodded slowly, appreciating his honesty. I need to think about this, of course. He stepped back, creating space between us. Take whatever time you need. I moved toward the door, then paused. If I decide yes, what time tonight? 8. A flicker of something hope perhaps crossed his face. I'll text you the address. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze of conflicting thoughts. Every rational argument against accepting. His invitation was countered by an equally compelling emotional pull toward him. By 5 o'clock, I'd analyzed the situation from every angle without reaching a conclusion. In the end, the decision wasn't rational at all. I arrived at his building at 8 exactly. The doorman escorted me to a private elevator that opened directly into Adrian's penthouse apartment. The space was stunning floor-to-ceiling windows, showcasing a panoramic view of the city. Minimalist furniture and warm neutrals, artwork that was clearly original and valuable without being ostentatious. Adrian emerged from what appeared to be the kitchen, a dish towel draped over his shoulder. The casual domesticity of the image was so at odds with his professional persona that I almost laughed. You came, he said simply. I did. I remained near the elevator, still uncertain of my decision. He gestured toward the open kitchen. I'm cooking. Would you like wine? Please. I followed him, taking in details of his private space. Everything was meticulously organized yet comfortable. Like him, precise but not cold. He poured red wine into a glass and handed it to me. Nervous? Yes, I admitted. No point in pretending otherwise. Good. So am I. He returned to stirring something that smelled delicious. That seems appropriate. The acknowledgement of his own nervousness eased some of my tension. I perched on a stool at the kitchen island, watching him work. I didn't know you cooked. There's quite a lot you don't know about me. His focus remained on the task, but his tone was lighter than usual. That's rather the point of tonight. Dinner was simple, but excellent pasta with a sauce heat apparently. Learned to make in Florence, fresh bread and a salad. The conversation flowed more easily than I'd expected, touching on literature, travel, childhood memories. Adrian revealed himself to be surprisingly funny in private, with a dry wit that emerged when professional constraints were removed. After dinner, he suggested the terrace. The spring night was cool but pleasant, the city lights creating a magical backdrop. We sat side by side on a comfortable outdoor sofa, wine glasses in hand. May I ask you something personal? He said after a comfortable silence. Isn't that the purpose of tonight? He acknowledged this with a slight smile. What happened at Horizon Books? The real story, not the professional version. The question caught me off guard. How do you know there's a different version? Because I know James Caldwell, and I know there's more to why you left. His tone remained gentle, not pushing. I stared out at the city lights, considering how much to share. He made advances. I refused. He made my life increasingly difficult until I had no choice but to leave. Did you report him? I tried. The bitterness crept into my voice despite my efforts. I protected him. Said it was my word against his, and his word came with 20 years of company loyalty. Adrian's expression hardened. That's why you included the honesty clause in our contract. Yes, I met his gaze directly. I needed to know I'd be dealing with someone who valued truth. He was quiet for a moment. Thank you for telling me. Your turn, I said. Something you don't tell people in professional settings. He considered, then said, I started the agency because Margot tried to destroy my career after our divorce. No publishing house in New York would hire me. What happened? She accused me of emotional manipulation, said I was controlling, psychologically abusive. His voice remained even, but I saw the tension in his jaw. The truth was more complicated. We were both ambitious, both dominant personalities. Neither of us knew how to yield without feeling diminished. And the color code system? Partly from that experience, partly from what happened with Thomas Riley. He set his wine glass down. Clear communication might have saved both relationships. The vulnerability of his admission moved me. Without thinking, I reached for his hand. His fingers intertwined, with mine warm and solid. Olivia, he said softly, I need to be absolutely clear about something. I tensed slightly, waiting. If we pursue this, it won't be casual for me. His gaze held mine, unflinching. I don't do casual. Not with someone I respect. The directness was breathtaking. What would it be then? Intentional, exclusive, as serious as we both wanted to become. His thumb traced small circles on my palm, but also carefully separated from our professional relationship. Is that even possible? With clear boundaries and complete honesty? Yes, he hesitated, but it requires trust. From both of us, double quotes trust. The word hung between us, weighted with implication. Remember the safe word? He continued. Fine, use it. Anytime, for any reason. No explanation needed, no consequences. Pine, I repeated, testing the feel of it. May I kiss you, Olivia? The question was formal, deliberate, giving me control, even as he initiated. Instead of answering, I leaned forward and pressed my lips to his. The kiss began tentatively, a gentle exploration. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone with surprising tenderness. When we finally pulled apart, his expression was more open than I'd ever seen it. Green? He asked softly. Very green, I confirmed, my voice barely above a whisper, his smile rare and genuine transformed. His face, good, We stayed on the terrace for hours, talking and touching with increasing familiarity. Each kiss was deeper than the last, each touch more confident. Yet Adrian maintained a careful restraint, never pushing beyond what felt natural in the moment. When the night air grew too cool, we moved inside. Standing in his living room, the city lights creating a luminous backdrop, I faced a decision that suddenly seemed inevitable. "Stay," Adrian said simply. "Is that a request or a command?" I asked, needing to understand exactly what we were beginning. "Always a request," he answered. "Between us, everything is a choice freely made." I stepped closer, my decision clear. "Then I choose to stay." His kiss this time was different, deeper, more urgent. His hand slid around my waist, drawing me against him. I felt the careful control he'd maintained all evening beginning to slip, revealing the passion beneath. "Olivia," he murmured against my lips. "Are you certain?" "Yes," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I trust you." Those 3 words changed something in his expression, a dawning wonder, as if I'd given him something precious and unexpected. "Thank you," he said softly, and I understood that for Adrian Wolfe, trust was the most intimate gift of all. Morning light filtered through Adrian's bedroom windows, creating patterns across the sheets. I watched the slow rise and fall of his chest as he slept, a rare opportunity to observe him without his careful self-containment. In sleep, the sharp edges softened. The perpetual tension in his jaw relaxed, making him appear younger, more vulnerable. Last night had been unexpected. Not the fact that we'd ended up in his bed, that had felt inevitable from the moment I arrived. What surprised me was the tenderness. Adrian's reputation, his demeanor, even his confession about his marriage to Margot All had led me to expect someone dominant, perhaps even demanding. Instead, he had been attentive, responsive, almost reverent. Each touch, each kiss had been offered rather than taken. When he finally moved above me, his gaze had remained locked with mine, watching for any sign of hesitation or discomfort. "Stay with me," he'd whispered. Not a command about physical presence, but a request for emotional connection. I had never felt so seen, so known. Adrian stirred beside me, his eyes opening slowly. For a moment, he simply looked at me, his expression unguarded. "Good morning," he said, voice rough with sleep. "Good morning." I felt suddenly shy, uncertain of the protocols in this new territory. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "Sleep well?" "Yes, better than I had in months, actually. You?" The sound was affirmative, almost contented. So different from his usual precise responses, neither of us seemed eager to break the peaceful bubble with practical concerns. He traced lazy patterns on my shoulder, his touch casual yet intimate. "What are you thinking?" he asked finally. "That you're different here, in private." His fingers paused. "Different how?" "Softer." I traced the line of his jaw, less controlled. "Not entirely accurate," he said, but without defensiveness. "I'm always controlled, Olivia. But what I choose to control varies depending on context." "And what are you controlling now?" His smile was slow, almost predatory. "The urge to keep you in this bed all day when we both have commitments to honor." The reminder of the outside world, of our professional relationship, broke the morning spell. I glanced at the clock on his nightstand. 7:30. "Work," I said, sitting up and clutching the sheet to my chest. "Indeed." He sat up as well, watching me with thoughtful eyes. "Are you having regrets?" "No," I answered honestly. "But I am having concerns about logistics." He nodded. "Understandable. We should discuss parameters." Only Adrian would approach morning after conversations like a negotiation, yet I found his directness reassuring. "At the office," he continued, "nothing changes professionally. You're my executive assistant, I'm your employer. Our private relationship remains completely separate, And if someone suspects, people will always speculate, he said pragmatically. What matters is that we maintain appropriate boundaries in professional contexts, like Malcolm Reed. I asked, remembering the dinner where Adrian had implied a personal connection. A special case, Adrian acknowledged. We'll handle similar situations individually with clear communication between us about strategies. I nodded, appreciating his thoroughness. And us, outside the office? That's for us to define together. His expression softened. What do you want, Olivia? The directness of the question caught me off guard. What did I want? I barely understood what had happened between us, let alone what it might become. I want ... I hesitated, then decided on honesty. I want to explore this, whatever it is. Without pressure or predetermined expectations, he considered this. So we continue as we began last night, getting to know each other personally outside our professional roles. Yes, the simplicity felt right. And we maintain absolute separation between personal and professional. Agreed. He glanced at the clock, which means we should prepare for work. You're welcome to use the shower. There are new toothbrushes in the cabinet. Just like that, we shifted back toward our professional selves. I showered quickly, using his expensive shampoo and body wash, surrounding myself with his scent. When I emerged, a fresh set of clothes waited on the bed, a simple blouse and skirt from the office wardrobe, suitable for work but not identical to anything I'd worn recently. Adrian had prepared coffee and a light breakfast. We ate quietly, a comfortable silence between us. At 8:30, he called for 2 separate cars. You'll leave first, he explained. I'll follow 30 minutes later. Different entrances to the building. The careful orchestration felt both pragmatic and slightly illicit. You've done this before, I observed, immediately regretting the implication. Maintained privacy? He countered smoothly. Yes, it's a skill in this industry. The non-answer was telling, but I didn't press. Whatever Adrian's past contained, it was just that past. What mattered was our present agreement. At the door, he kissed me briefly. Tonight? Your place? Yes, I agreed, surprised by how eagerly I anticipated seeing him again. 8 o'clock, he confirmed. And Olivia? Green or yellow about this morning? I smiled at his use of our professional code in this new context. Green, definitely green. His answering smile warm, genuine stayed with me all the way to the office. The workday proceeded normally, though I was acutely aware of Adrian's presence whenever we were in the same room. If anyone noticed anything different between us, they gave no sign. Adrian maintained his usual professional demeanor, focused, somewhat distant, occasionally demanding. Only once did our new dynamic intrude. During a meeting with a difficult author, Adrian's hand brushed mine as we both reached for the same document. A small touch, entirely innocent to observers. But the brief context sent electricity through me, and when I glanced up, I caught the heat in his gaze before his expression returned to professional neutrality. That evening, Adrian arrived at my apartment precisely at 8. He brought dinner takeout from an excellent Thai restaurant and a bottle of wine. My place was modest compared to his penthouse, but he made no comment on the size or furnishings. Instead, he seemed interested in the personal touches, the overflowing bookshelf, the collection of vintage typewriter keys I'd framed as art, the photographs of my family. Your parents? He asked, examining a picture of an older Asian couple standing beside me at my college graduation. Yes, they live in Ohio now. Dad was an engineer, Mom a chemistry professor, both retired. They must be proud of you. They wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer, I admitted. Publishing was a disappointment. And now? He set the photo down carefully. They've accepted it, mostly. I smiled ruefully. Asian parent standards are challenging. I understand high expectations, he said, expression thoughtful. My father was similar, though in different ways. You've never mentioned your family. There's not much to tell. Father was a corporate attorney. Mother left when I was young. No siblings. He delivered the information with detached precision, as if reciting facts about a stranger. Were you close with your father? No, the single syllable held volumes. He valued achievement, not connection. The insight into Adrian's background explained much about his controlled demeanor, his emphasis on clear communication. I wanted to ask more, but sensed his reluctance. Instead, I suggested we eat before the food got cold. Dinner was relaxed, our conversation ranging from work matters to books we'd loved. Adrian revealed unexpected preferences, a fondness for science fiction, a childhood obsession with astronomy, a secret appreciation for reality cooking shows. You're joking, I said, laughing at this last confession. You watch cooking competitions? They're strategically fascinating, he defended, smiling slightly, and occasionally educational. After dinner, we moved to the sofa with our wine. The proximity was charged with awareness, but neither of us rushed to close the distance. May I ask you something personal? Adrian said after a comfortable silence. Of course. What did you expect last night before you came to my apartment? The question was direct, but not accusatory. I considered it seriously. I expected ... I hesitated, then decided on complete honesty. I expected someone more dominant, more controlling. He nodded, unsurprised. Because of my professional persona? Partly. And because of what you said about Margot? About you both being dominant personalities? Ah, he set his wine glass down. There's a significant difference between being controlling and being dominant, Olivia. The first is about power over others. The second can be about control of oneself. The distinction resonated with what I'd observed. And you're the second, I try to be. His gaze was steady. I don't want power over you. I want your willing participation. Your chosen surrender, which is something else entirely. The word surrender sent a shiver through me. Is that what you want? For me to surrender to you? Only if it's what you want to? His voice dropped lower, and only in certain contexts. Never professionally, never against your will, never without explicit consent. The conversation had shifted into dangerous, exciting territory. And if I said that interested me? Exploration in that direction? His expression changed subtly, a heightened focus, an intensity that made my breath catch. Then we would discuss boundaries, establish clear communication, and proceed with extreme care. Like the safe word, I said, understanding. Exactly like that. He moved closer, his knee touching mine. Pine. Anytime, anywhere. No questions or consequences. That's the foundation of trust. I nodded, heart racing. And tonight? What would exploration look like? It would begin with a question, he said, voice low and steady. May I touch you, Olivia? The formality of his request, coupled with the heat in his eyes, created a powerful contradiction. Control and desire, restraint and passion. Yes, I whispered. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb tracing my lower lip with exquisite gentleness. And if I asked you to close your eyes? I answered by letting my eyelids fall shut. Darkness heightened my other senses, the sound of his breathing, the scent of his cologne, the warmth of his proximity. Good, he murmured, the approval in his voice sending warmth through me. Keep them closed until I tell you otherwise. His lips brushed mine, a feather-light touch that left me wanting more. I felt him shift, sensed his movement away from me, but kept my eyes obediently closed. Stand up, he directed, his voice coming. From a few feet away, I complied, feeling strangely vulnerable, yet secure in the darkness behind my eyelids. I'm going to undress you, he said. Slowly. If at any point you want me to stop, say yellow to pause or pine to end completely. Do you understand? Yes, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. What are your words? Yellow to pause. Pine to stop. Perfect. His fingertips brushed my collarbone, then moved to the top button of my blouse. Remember when we first met? When I asked you to unbutton your blouse in my office? Yes. The memory was vivid, my fear, my defiance, my surprising willingness. I wanted you even then, he admitted, slipping the first button free. Not because of your compliance, but because of your strength. Your willingness to set boundaries while still taking risks. Another button released, then another. Cool air touched my skin as he parted the fabric. You're beautiful, he said softly, pushing the blouse off my shoulders. His hands skinned down my arms as he removed it completely. Next came my skirt, the zipper lowered with deliberate slowness, the fabric sliding down my legs to pull at my feet. Step forward, he instructed. I did, leaving the skirt behind. Standing in only my underwear, eyes still closed, I felt uniquely vulnerable yet strangely powerful. This was my choice. My willing participation. Adrian's hand settled on my waist. Warm and steady. Open your eyes, Olivia. I did. He stood before me, still fully clothed, his expression a mixture of desire and reverence. Yellow or green? He asked. Green, I replied without hesitation. His smile was slow, satisfied. Come here. I stepped into his embrace, the fabric of his shirt rough against my bare skin. His kiss was deeper now, more demanding, yet still controlled. When he finally pulled away, we were both breathing harder. Bedroom, he said, taking my hand out in my room. He undressed slowly, allowing me to watch as he revealed himself. His body was lean, muscular, in an understated way, marked with a few scars that hinted at untold stories. When he joined me on the bed, his touch was both gentle and confident. He explored me thoroughly, learning what made me gasp, what made me arch toward him, what made me whisper his name. Through it all, he maintained that careful control, channeling passion rather than being overwhelmed by it. Tell me what you want, he murmured against my throat. You, I said simply. All of you. His eyes darkened. Are you certain? Yes. I reached up to touch his face. I trust you, Adrian. Something profound passed between us at those words, an acknowledgement of what we were sharing beyond the physical connection. When he finally moved above me, entering me with careful restraint, his gaze remained locked with mine. The intimacy was almost unbearable. Not just bodies joining, but something deeper, more vulnerable. Stay with me, he whispered, echoing his words from the night before. Don't close your eyes. Stay present. I did, watching his expression as we moved together, the careful control gradually fracturing as passion built between us. When release finally came, it was his name on my lips, his gaze still holding mine, his body trembling with the effort of maintained restraint even in surrender. Afterward, he held me close, his heartbeat gradually slowing against my cheek. The silence between us was comfortable, weighted with unspoken understanding. Green? He asked finally, his voice rough with emotion. I smiled against his chest. The greenest green that ever greened. His laugh was unexpected, genuine, eloquent, as always. We lay together in comfortable silence until I finally asked the question that had been forming in my mind. Adrian, what is this exactly? Between us? He considered the question with his usual thoughtfulness. It's a beginning, he said finally. The details are for us to discover together. It wasn't a precise answer, but somehow it was exactly right. A beginning with the story still unwritten. The thought should have frightened me, uncertainty always had before. But lying there in Adrian's arms, I felt something I hadn't expected. Freedom. The freedom that comes with true trust, with knowing that whatever path we chose, we would walk it with open eyes and honest hearts. I turned my face up to his, finding his gaze already on me, A beginning, I agreed. I like that. His kiss was gentle, a promise rather than a demand. And for the first time in my life, surrender felt like strength. Waking in Adrian's arms felt both strange and natural, a contradiction, but seemed to define our evolving relationship. Light filtered through my bedroom blinds, casting stripes across his sleeping form. I studied him quietly, reconciling this private version with the controlled professional I'd known for months. When his eyes opened, finding mine immediately, the intimacy of the moment caught in my throat. "You're staring," he observed, voice rough with sleep. "Just wondering how we'll do this," I admitted. "Today at work." He reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "The same way we've always done it, with clear boundaries and mutual respect." The simplicity of his answer reassured me, though doubt lingered. "And no one will know?" "People may suspect," he said pragmatically, "but suspicion isn't confirmation." We readied ourselves with careful efficiency, Adrian borrowing my shower while I prepared coffee. The domesticity felt premature yet somehow right. "I'll leave first," he said, checking his watch. "Take a different car, arrive separately." I nodded, appreciating his discretion. At the door, he paused. "Dinner tonight?" "My place?" "Yes," I agreed, suddenly shy, "but I should go home after." "Early meeting tomorrow." He accepted this without question. Of course, his kiss was brief but tender. Until later, then. At the office, Adrian was exactly as he had always been, focused, demanding, occasionally impatient. If his gaze lingered on me during meetings, no one seemed to notice. If my responses to his requests carried a new awareness, it remained our secret. Around noon, Diane appeared at my office door. "Lunch," she suggested. "That new place on 47th? I hesitated, then nodded. Diane had been friendly since my first day, but we'd never socialized outside the office. Her invitation felt significant, though I wasn't sure why. Over salads, she studied me with knowing eyes. "So," she said finally, "you and Adrian." My fork paused midway to my mouth. "Excuse me?" "It's fine," she assured me, lowering her voice. "I've been with him since the beginning. I know all his patterns." "I don't know what you're, Olivia." Her expression was kind but direct. "I'm not judging. I'm offering friendship. Adrian is ... She searched for the right word. Complex and private. Those he lets closer few." I set my fork down carefully. "Has there been talk?" "No," she said firmly. "And there won't be if you're both discreet, which Adrian always is." Always. The word echoed, reminding me that whatever was happening between us, I wasn't the first. The thought shouldn't have stung, of course, there had been others, but it did. "We're professional colleagues," I said carefully. Diane's smile was knowing, but not unkind. "Of course, just ... Be careful with your heart. Adrian plays by rules others don't always understand." The warning lingered as I returned to the office. Adrian was in a client meeting, his office door closed. I buried myself in work, trying to process Diane's words without overreacting. At 3, my direct line chimed once. Routine matter. I entered Adrian's office to find him alone, reviewing contracts. "The Diaz manuscript needs legal clearance," he said without looking up. "Can you expedite?" "Of course." I collected the document, hyper-aware of the space between us. "Anything else?" He glanced up, expression professionally neutral. "Are you all right?" "Fine," I said automatically. "Just busy." He studied me briefly, then nodded. "Tonight, then." The dismissal was gentle but clear. Boundaries maintained, the rest of the day passed in a blur of tasks and meetings. At 6, I texted Adrian to confirm. "Dinner." His response was immediate. "Looking forward to it." Simple words that somehow carried weight. At his apartment. Dinner was already prepared, a simple pasta dish he'd made himself. We ate at the kitchen island, conversation flowing easily. Work topics gradually gave way to personal ones. Diane knows, I said finally, addressing the elephant in the room. Adrian didn't seem surprised. Yes, I suspected she might. She warned me to be careful with my heart. His expression remained calm, but something flickered in his eyes. Diane has been with me a long time. She's seen ... situations. Situations, I repeated. Previous assistants? Some, he acknowledged, though not all in the same capacity. The careful phrasing told me what I needed to know. How many? Does it matter? He countered gently. It might, I admitted. To me. He set his fork down, giving me his full attention. 2, both brief, both ended when they left the agency for other opportunities, both amicable partings. The honesty was both reassuring and unsettling. And Margot? Was she your assistant first? No, we met as equals. His expression grew distant. Though that balance shifted during our marriage, I nodded, absorbing this. Thank you for being honest. Always, he promised. It's our foundation. After dinner, we moved to the sofa. Physical intimacy came easier now, the initial hesitation replaced by growing familiarity. When his kisses deepened, hands moving beneath my blouse, I responded eagerly. Bedroom? He suggested, voice rough with desire. Yes, I agreed, already anticipating what would follow. Afterward, lying in his arms, I found myself wondering where this path would lead us. The contradiction of our situation, the strict professional boundaries, alongside this growing personal connection, created a strange tension that was both exciting and unsettling. What are you thinking? Adrian asked, fingers tracing patterns on my bare shoulder. That this is complicated, I admitted. Wonderful, but complicated. Yes, he agreed simply. Most worthwhile things are. I propped myself up on one elbow, studying his face in the dim light. Diane seemed to think you had rules for relationships. Something like amusement crossed his features. Did she? Do you? He considered this. Not rules, exactly. Principles, clarity, honesty, respect for boundaries. And what happens when those principles conflict with emotions? His expression grew more serious. That's when principles matter most, Olivia. Feelings can be confusing, contradictory. Principles provide structure when emotions would lead us astray. The answer was quintessentially Adrian logical, measured, structured. Yet something about it troubled me, suggesting limitations I wasn't sure I could accept. Before I could formulate a response, his phone chimed with an urgent message. The outside world intruding once again. Work, he explained, scanning the text. Malcolm Reed is threatening to leave the agency. I need to call him. Just like that, we shifted back to our professional roles. Adrian the agent, me the assistant, the intimate moment shelved for another time. As he took the call in the other room, I wondered if this compartmentalization was sustainable. Whether we could truly separate the personal and professional when both involved the same complex. Fascinating man. 3 weeks into our private relationship, Adrian suggested a business trip to Chicago. A major publishing conference would provide networking opportunities, and several of his clients would be speaking. You'll accompany me, he said, sliding the itinerary across my desk. 4 days, 3 nights. I scanned the schedule panel: discussions, private meetings, cocktail receptions, separate rooms. I asked quietly, though we were alone in my office. Adjoining, he replied. Connected but distinct, professional appearance maintained. The careful planning was typical Adrian, everything considered, all contingencies addressed. Yet, as I reviewed the details, a question formed. Is this a business trip with personal elements, or a personal trip with business justification? His expression shifted surprise, then appreciation for my directness. Both, he admitted. Does that concern you? No, I said truthfully. Just clarifying expectations. The Chicago trip began smoothly. We maintained professional distance during travel, focusing on work in the car and on the plane. At the hotel luxury accommodations overlooking Lake Michigan, Adrian checked us in efficiently, handling the connected rooms without drawing attention. The first day was strictly business meetings with editors, attendance at panels where Adrian's clients spoke. I took careful notes, arranged follow-ups, managed the intricate dance of Adrian's schedule with practiced ease. If anyone noted the subtle changes in our dynamic, the way Adrian's hand occasionally brushed mine, the private glances exchanged during dull presentations, they gave no sign. That evening, after a reception with publishing executives, we returned to the hotel separately. Adrian texted when it was safe to use the connecting door dot in private. Our relationship bloomed. The compartmentalization that had troubled me in New York seemed less problematic here. The boundaries between professional and personal clearer somehow dawned on the second day. We attended a luncheon where Malcolm Reed was the keynote speaker. Adrian had spent the previous night on the phone with him, smoothing ruffled feathers, reassuring him about promotional plans for his upcoming book. Reed noticed me immediately, his gaze lingering as we took our seats at the designated table. "This is Chen," he greeted, his smile calculating. "Still assisting our friend Adrian?" "Happily," I replied, matching his tone. "Your speech was impressive. Yet you were watching Adrian's reactions rather than me." His observation was quiet for my ears only as others at the table engaged in separate conversations. "Interesting dynamic you two have." Adrian, seated across from us, was deep in conversation with the senior editor from a major house. Reed's implication hung between us, deliberately provocative. "My job is to anticipate his needs," I said carefully. "I'm sure it is." Reed's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Tell me, does he use the color system with you? Green, yellow, red? His famous communication protocol?" The question caught me off guard. "That's standard for all agency staff," I managed. "Of course." Reed sipped his water. "Did he tell you about its origins?" "A fascinating story." Before I could respond, Adrian's attention shifted to us, his expression revealing nothing. "Malcolm," he said smoothly, "I see you've been entertaining Olivia." "Just getting better acquainted," Reed replied, sharing agency history. Something passed between the men, an unspoken challenge. Adrian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Olivia," Adrian said, his tone professionally pleasant, "would you check with the organizers about tomorrow's schedule? There seems to be a conflict with the Robinson meeting." A dismissal, thinly disguised as a request. I nodded, excusing myself. From the table dot as I spoke with the event coordinator, I watched Adrian and Reed from across the room. Their conversation appeared intense but controlled, both men maintaining public composure while clearly engaged in some private contest of wills. That evening, Adrian was distracted, responding to my questions with unusual brevity. When I finally pressed him about Reed's comments, his expression closed. "Malcolm enjoys creating discord," he said. "It's best not to engage." He seemed to know about us, I persisted. And he mentioned the color system's origins. Adrian's gaze sharpened. What exactly did he say? "Just that there was a fascinating story behind it," before you interrupted. Something like relief crossed his features. "Malcolm collects information, like weapons, knowledge he can deploy at strategic moments." What was he going to tell me? Adrian hesitated, then sighed. "Probably that the system was inspired by BDSM protocols," which is partially true, though vastly oversimplified. "Is there more I should know?" I asked, sensing his reluctance. "Nothing relevant to us," he assured me. "Ancient history, Olivia. The evasion was subtle but unmistakable." I let it go, unwilling to push when Adrian seemed so determined to close the subject. The next morning brought unexpected developments. Adrian was called to an emergency meeting with a client in crisis, leaving me to handle a scheduled lunch with Elizabeth Foster, a promising debut novelist the agency was courting. "You'll represent me," Adrian instructed, already heading for the door. "Elizabeth values editorial perspective. Your publishing background will resonate with her. Shouldn't we reschedule?" I suggested, uncomfortable with the sudden responsibility. "No, this is an opportunity, Olivia. I trust your judgment." The meeting with Elizabeth went surprisingly well. We connected over shared literary tastes and similar experiences with difficult bosses. By dessert, she was asking pointed questions about agency representation. "Adrian speaks highly of you," she said, signaling for the check. "Says you have exceptional insight." "He's generous with praise," I demurred, though privately pleased. "Not according to industry gossip," Elizabeth smiled. "He's known for being brilliant but difficult, demanding perfection from everyone, especially those closest to him." I maintained a neutral expression. "Every successful person has critics." "True." She studied me thoughtfully. "Would you recommend him? As an agent? As someone to work with closely?" The question felt loaded, layered with meaning beyond the professional inquiry. "Adrian is exacting," I acknowledged. "He expects excellence because he delivers it, but he's also fair, ethical, and genuinely committed to his client's success." Elizabeth nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Good to know. I'll be in touch about representation." When I reported this successful meeting to Adrian that evening, his approval was evident but measured. "Well done," he said simply. "Though I never doubted you, it felt like a test," I admitted. "Both from you and from her." "It was," he confirmed without apology. "Elizabeth needed to see that my team is capable, and I needed to see how you'd handle increased responsibility." "And if I'd failed?" His expression remained calm. "You didn't." "But if I had?" I pressed, suddenly needing to understand the stakes. Adrian considered me carefully. "Then we would have addressed it professionally." "Just professionally?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "Are you asking if our personal relationship hinges on your professional performance?" Put so bluntly, the question sounded ridiculous. Yet something about the day Reed's insinuations, Adrian's evasiveness, the unexpected test had triggered uncertainty. "I'm asking about boundaries," I clarified. "Where they exist and how firm they are." Adrian moved closer, his expression softening. "Our professional relationship has standards that must be maintained. Our personal connection is separate evaluated, on different criteria entirely, and if those worlds conflict, then we communicate," he said simply. "Yellow, red, pine, whatever is needed to navigate the situation." The answer was quintessentially Adrian, logical, structured, focused on systems rather than emotions. Yet, for the first time, I found myself wondering if such neat compartmentalization was truly possible. That night, our lovemaking carried a different energy, more intense, almost urgent. Adrian's usual control seemed slightly fractured, revealing glimpses of deeper emotions beneath the carefully maintained surface. Afterward, as we lay together in the darkened hotel room, I found myself studying his profile against the city lights, filtering through the curtains. "What are you thinking?" he asked, sensing my gaze. "That I still don't fully understand you," I admitted. His expression remained unreadable in the dim light. "Is that a problem?" "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "But I think it might be. The document wasn't meant for my eyes." It had been accidentally included in a folder of contracts Adrian asked me to review. A single page that changed everything. Psychological assessment. Adrian Wolf conducted as part of divorce proceedings. Wolf v. Wolf excerpt from conclusions. Subject demonstrates significant control patterns consistent with psychological manipulation. Relationships are approached systematically rather than emotionally, with evidence of calculated management of others' perceptions and responses. While not meeting clinical criteria for personality disorder, subject shows concerning patterns of emotional detachment and strategic interpersonal engagement. Recommendation: therapy focused on emotional connectivity and authentic relationship development. I stared at the page, cold spreading through my chest. The assessment was dated 5 years ago, during Adrian's divorce from Margot. The therapist's name and credentials were listed at the bottom, a respected professional whose evaluation would carry significant weight. My first impulse was to return it immediately, pretend I'd never seen it. But the words echoed in my mind, connecting dots I'd been too enchanted to notice. The color code system, the careful structuring of our relationship, the compartmentalization that kept our professional and personal lives separate, the tests that seemed designed to evaluate my responses under pressure. Had it all been manipulation? A calculated system rather than genuine connection? I slipped the document into my bag, my hands trembling slightly. Throughout the afternoon, I reviewed every interaction with Adrian through this new lens. The unusual interview, the explicit contract with its boundary specifications, the safe word protocol that had seemed so thoughtful. What had Reed been about? To tell me in Chicago? What history had Adrian been so reluctant to share? By evening, doubt had crystallized into determination. I needed answers, not speculation. Adrian was working late, reviewing manuscripts in his office. I knocked once and entered without waiting, a privilege of our evolving relationship. He glanced up, a slight smile warming his features. "Olivia, I thought you left. We need to talk." I closed the door behind me. Something in my tone alerted him. He set aside his work, giving me his full attention. "What's wrong?" I placed the psychological assessment on his desk, watching his expression shift from confusion to recognition to carefully controlled neutrality. "Where did you get this?" he asked, voice deliberately even. It was mixed in with the Hernandez. "Contracts." I remained standing, needing the physical advantage. "Is it accurate?" Adrian stared at the document for a long moment. "It's complex." That's not an answer. His gaze lifted to mine, assessing, calculating. I could almost see him formulating strategies, weighing options. "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't manage this conversation. Just tell me the truth." Something shifted in his expression, resignation, perhaps. This was Margot's weapon in our divorce. Her attempt to portray normal relationship dynamics as manipulation. "Is that all it was?" He hesitated, then sighed. "No, there's truth here, though not as she presented it." "Explain." My voice sounded strange to my own ears, harder than I'd intended. Adrian leaned back, studying me with that penetrating gaze. "I approach relationships methodically. I establish clear parameters, maintain boundaries, implement communication systems. It's how I function." "Because of control issues?" I supplied. "Because of clarity," he countered. "Because emotional ambiguity is dangerous." "Dangerous to whom?" His jaw tightened. "To everyone involved." I felt a sudden, overwhelming need to sit. My legs carried me to the chair across from his desk. "Have you been manipulating me, Adrian? Was our relationship designed as some kind of ... system?" Pain flashed across his features, genuine, unfiltered. "No, God, Olivia, no." "Then what is this?" I gestured to the document. What was Reed going to tell me in Chicago? Adrian closed his eyes briefly, composing himself. "After Thomas Riley died, I was ... devastated, guilt-ridden. I sought help, a therapist, specializing in control dynamics." He opened his eyes, meeting my gaze directly. "She helped me develop structured communication systems, first for myself, then for my professional relationships, the color codes, the explicit boundaries, all designed to prevent misunderstandings and protect everyone involved. And our personal relationship, the safe word, the careful structuring of everything between us, extensions of the same principle." he admitted. But not manipulation, Olivia. Never that. What was Reed going to tell me? I pressed, needing the full picture. Adrian's expression tightened. That before the agency, before Margot, I was involved in the BDSM community, where I first encountered structured consent systems that later influenced my professional protocols. The admission hung between us. Not shocking in itself, many people explored such dynamics, but his deliberate withholding of the information felt significant. Why didn't you tell me? Because it's not relevant to us, he said firmly. Those experiences informed my communication preferences, nothing more. You should have told me. The hurt was deeper than I'd expected. You let me believe the systems were entirely your creation. I was afraid, he admitted quietly. Afraid you'd misinterpret, assume intentions that weren't there. Like I'm doing now, I challenged. Are you? The question hung between us, demanding honest assessment. Was I overreacting? Reading manipulation into structures that were merely Adrian's way of creating safety? I don't know, I confessed. That's what scares me. I can't tell where the genuine Adrian ends and the systematic approach begins. He leaned forward, expression more open than I'd ever seen it. They're not separate, Olivia. The systems are part of me, how I process, how I connect. But they're tools for authentic relationship, not substitutes for it. A psychological assessment was conducted during an acrimonious divorce by a therapist who met me twice. He interrupted. Margot's chosen professional, not mine. I wanted to believe him, needed to believe him. But doubt had taken root, tangling with affection and desire in a confusing knot. I need time, I said finally, to process this. Adrian nodded, accepting my withdrawal without protest. Of course. As I gathered my things to leave, he spoke again. Olivia, whatever you decide, I want you to know something. I paused, waiting. What exists between us is real, he said simply. Structured, yes. Carefully navigated, yes, but genuine. The most genuine connection I've had in years. The vulnerability in his voice caught me off guard. It would have been easier if he'd been defensive or manipulative, confirming my worst fears. Instead, his quiet sincerity left me more confused than before. Good night, Adrian, I said, unable to offer more at home. I poured a glass of wine and tried to sort through my tangled thoughts. The systematic nature of our relationship now seemed obvious in retrospect. The careful progression from professional to personal, the explicit discussions of boundaries, the structured communication protocols. Yet I couldn't deny the genuine connection I'd felt. The moments when Adrian's careful control had fractured, revealing vulnerability beneath. The way he listened, truly listened, when I expressed concerns or set limits. Was structure inherently manipulative? Or was it simply Adrian's way of creating safety in a world he experienced differently than most? I remembered something he'd said early in our relationship. I approach attraction as an efficiency problem. At the time, I'd found it almost endearing typical. Adrian, analytical, even about emotions. Now I wondered, was it calculation or simply self-awareness? As midnight approached, my phone chimed with a text from Adrian. I respect your need for space. Take whatever time you need. Just know that my feelings for you are genuine, not systematic. I stared at the message, tears blurring my vision. Even now, he was respecting boundaries, communicating clearly. The question was whether that clarity was manipulation or the purest form of respect he could offer. 3 days of silence stretched between us, professionally cordial interactions. At the office, nothing more. Adrian respected my request for space with characteristic precision. No personal texts, no lingering glances. No attempts to discuss our situation during work hours. The distance should have provided clarity. Instead, I found myself missing him with an intensity that surprised me. Missing not just the physical connection, but the emotional one, the way he listened, the rare moments when his carefully constructed facade softened. On the fourth day, I arrived at the office to find a note on my desk. When you're ready to talk. No pressure. Beneath it lay a small wooden box. Inside was a simple silver key with a tag attached. My home, your choice. Always. The gesture was quintessentially Adrian offering access without demanding reciprocation, respecting my agency, while making his own position clear. That evening, I used the key. Adrian's apartment was dimly lit, classical music playing softly. He stood at the window, silhouetted against the city lights, so reminiscent of our first evening together that my chest ached with the memory dot he turned as the door closed behind me. Olivia. Just my name, spoken with such careful restraint that I could hear everything he wasn't saying. I've been thinking, I began, remaining near the door, about systems and intentions, about you. He nodded, waiting. I keep asking myself if what's between us is real, I continued. If your structured approach to relationship is authentic connection or calculated strategy. And his voice was carefully neutral, and I realized I'm asking the wrong question. I moved further into the room. The question isn't whether your methods are manipulative. It's whether they allow for genuine vulnerability, yours and mine. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, perhaps, that I'd reached this understanding. The psychological assessment described you as emotionally detached, I said. Is that how you see yourself? He considered this with characteristic thoughtfulness. Not detached, he said finally. Contained. There's a difference. Explain. Detachment suggests absence of feeling. Containment is about managing what's already there, often intensely there. His gaze was steady, direct. I feel deeply, Olivia. I simply process those feelings differently than most. The distinction resonated with what I'd observed, not coldness, but careful management of emotional intensity. The systems, I said slowly, the color codes, the explicit boundaries, they're not about controlling others. They're about creating safe space for connection. Yes, relief crossed his features. Exactly that. I moved closer, stopping just beyond arm's reach. I need to know something, Adrian, something important, anything. If I used our safe word right now, if I said pine, what would happen? His expression grew serious. Everything would stop. Whatever was happening between us, whatever might have been building. No questions, no consequences. Even if it hurt you? Even if it meant losing something you wanted? Especially then, he said without hesitation. That's the entire point. The certainty in his voice steadied me. Pine, I said clearly. Adrian went completely still. Then, with deliberate care, he took a step back. Okay, he said simply. What do you need? The response, immediate, without question or protest, moved me deeply. This wasn't manipulation. This was respect in its purest form. I needed to see, I explained softly, to know that your words matched your actions. Understanding dawned in his eyes. A test. Yes, I admitted. I'm sorry. Don't be. His smile was gentle. It was perfectly reasonable given the circumstances. We stood in silence for a moment, the space between us charged with possibility. The safe word still stands, he said finally. If you need more time, more space, I interrupted. I've had enough of both. Hope flickered across his features, quickly contained. What do you need then? Honesty, I said simply. Complete honesty, even when it's difficult. About your past, your patterns, your fears, all of it? He nodded slowly. That's fair, though it may take time. Openness doesn't come naturally to me. I know, I acknowledged. But it's necessary for trust. And trust is necessary for us, he completed the thought. I understand. I closed the distance between us, stopping just shy of touching. I'm still processing everything, Adrian. I can't promise I won't have more questions, more doubts. I wouldn't expect otherwise. His gaze was steady, unflinching. Questions and doubts are healthy. Suppressing them isn't. The response reassured me more than grand declarations might have. This was Adrian at his most authentic, thoughtful, honest, respecting complexity rather than simplifying it. May I? He asked, hand hovering near my face. I nodded, leaning into his touch as his palm cupped my cheek. The simple contact conveyed more than words could have: connection, relief, tentative hope. I've missed you, he admitted quietly. I've missed you too, I whispered, even while I was angry. His smile was soft, understanding. Complicated emotions, the most honest kind. The observation was so perfectly Adrian that I found myself smiling in return. He understood complexity, embraced it rather than fearing it. Perhaps that was what had drawn me to him from the beginning. Where do we go from here? I asked. Forward, he suggested, but carefully, with continued communication and absolute honesty. And the systems, the structured approach, they remain tools, he said thoughtfully. Useful, but not absolute. We can adapt them as needed, create our own methods that work for both of us. The collaborative framing struck me as significant, not his system that I would adapt to, but our system that we would create together. I'd like that, I said softly. His arms encircled me, holding me close without demand or pressure. In that embrace, I felt the careful balance he maintained: control and surrender, structure and freedom, safety and risk. Green? He murmured against my hair. I smiled against his chest, recognizing the question for what it was, not just about this moment, but about our path forward. Green, I confirmed. With eyes wide open, reconciliation brought a new depth to our relationship. Adrian made visible efforts toward greater openness, sharing pieces of his past that clearly caused him discomfort. My father believed vulnerability was weakness, he told me one evening, as we sat on his terrace. Emotions were inefficient distractions to be mastered, not experienced. That sounds lonely, I observed, watching his profile against the setting sun. It was. His admission came without defensiveness, but it was also the only model I knew. Structure became safety, systems became certainty, and Margot? I ventured carefully. What happened there? Adrian was quiet for so long, I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured, controlled. She wanted access to parts of me I'd never shared with anyone. When I couldn't provide what she needed, she became convinced. I was deliberately withholding, manipulating, rather than struggling. Were you? Struggling? Constantly. His smile was sad, self-aware. But I lacked the vocabulary to explain it, even to myself. The psychological assessment wasn't entirely wrong, Olivia. I do approach relationships systematically. It's how I make sense of emotional terrain that often feels foreign. The confession touched me deeply, not because it confirmed my fears, but because it must have cost him so much to acknowledge. Thank you, I said simply, for telling me. He nodded, eyes still on the horizon. It's easier with you. I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe because I don't demand access to all of you at once, I suggested. Maybe because I understand the value of boundaries too. His hand found mine, fingers intertwining. Maybe. 2 weeks. After our reconciliation, Adrian faced an unexpected crisis. Catherine Diaz, our promising debut novelist, received a devastating review in a major publication. Her response was to announce on social media that she was abandoning writing completely. Adrian worked tirelessly to contain the situation, calling in favors for positive coverage elsewhere, arranging encouraging notes from established authors, providing emotional support to Catherine directly. I'd never seen him so personally invested in a client's well-being. After a particularly difficult call with Catherine's publisher, I found him in his office, uncharacteristically disheveled. His tie was loosened, hair slightly mussed from running. His hands through it repeatedly. Are you all right? I asked, closing the door behind me. Fine, he said automatically, then caught himself. No, that's not true. I'm concerned about Catherine. She's talented, I offered. This will pass. It's not that simple. He sighed, rubbing his temples. She reminds me of myself at that age. Brilliant, but brittle. Success and failure carrying the same impossible weight. The parallels surprised me. You see yourself in her? Too much of myself, he admitted, a perfectionism. The fear of emotional exposure through her work. I moved closer, perching on the edge of his desk. Is that why you became an agent rather than a writer? Fear of exposure? His gaze snapped to mine, startled by the insight. How did you understand writing too well to have never attempted it? I said simply. Your editorial comments are too precise, too nuanced. A small, rueful smile touched his lips. I wrote a novel in college. My professor called it technically flawless and emotionally barren. That must have hurt. It was accurate, he said with surprising candor. I could construct perfect sentences, but couldn't translate genuine emotion onto the page. Catherine does both. That's why this matters so much. The vulnerability of his admission moved me deeply. Without thinking, I reached out, smoothing his rumpled hair back into place. He leaned into the touch, eyes closing briefly. You should go home, I suggested gently. There's nothing more you can do tonight. Come with me, he asked, opening his eyes to meet my gaze. Something in his expression was different Uranus I hadn't seen before. At his apartment. Adrian seemed uncharacteristically restless. He poured wine but barely touched it, began sentences only to abandon them mid-thought. Something was clearly troubling him beyond Catherine's situation. Adrian, I said finally, talk to me. He stopped his pacing, turning to face me with unexpected intensity. Do you know why my marriage to Margot failed? The abrupt question caught me off guard. You said you were both dominant personalities, that you couldn't give her what she needed. What I couldn't give her was my past, he corrected. She wanted explanations for my ... containment. I couldn't provide them. And now, I asked carefully, now I find myself wanting to tell you what I couldn't tell her. His voice was controlled, but tension radiated from him. It's unsettling. I moved too. The sofa, creating space beside me. I'm listening, whatever it is. He sat, hands clasped between his knees, gaze fixed on nothing. My father's control wasn't just emotional, he said finally. It was physical as well. Understanding dawned slowly, painfully. He hurt you? He disciplined me, Adrian clarified, the distinction clearly important to him. For showing emotion. For failing to meet expectations. For any deviation from his definition of excellence. My heart constricted. How old were you when it started? 6, perhaps? It continued until I left for college. His tone remained even, detached, a protective mechanism I now recognized. The methods were precise, calculated to maximize impact without leaving visible evidence. Adrian, I whispered, horror and sympathy tangling in my chest. I learned early that emotions were dangerous, he continued. That vulnerability invited pain. Systems and structures became survival strategies, ways to navigate a world where feelings meant punishment. I wanted to reach for him, but sensed he needed space to finish. This wasn't a story he'd shared often, perhaps ever. The irony, he said with a humorless smile, is that I became what he wanted. Controlled, disciplined, successful by conventional metrics, but not emotionally barren, I countered gently. Despite everything, something in my words seemed to reach him. His carefully maintained composure cracked just slightly, just for a moment. His hand found mine, fingers tightening almost painfully. This is why the safe word matters so much, he said quietly. Why consent and boundaries are non-negotiable for me. I never want anyone to feel ... unsafe in my presence. The admission explained so much: his careful attention to my comfort, his immediate response when I tested the safe word, his genuine distress at the thought of being manipulative. "Adrian," I said softly, "look at me." When he did, I saw vulnerability rarely permitted expression. "You are nothing like him," I said firmly. "Nothing." His breath caught the simple reassurance clearly, touching something deep. For a moment, I glimpsed the wounded boy beneath the controlled man, the child who'd learned to hide his pain behind perfect composure. "Thank you," he whispered, the words holding more weight than their simplicity suggested. I moved closer, wrapping my arms around him. His embrace was fierce, almost desperate, as if the confession had broken something loose inside him. When he kissed me, there was a new quality to his touch and openness, a surrender I hadn't experienced before. Later, in his bed, our lovemaking carried that same unguarded quality, less controlled, more emotionally raw. Afterward, he held me close, his heartbeat gradually slowing against my cheek. "I'd never told anyone about my father," he admitted, quietly. "Not even my therapist knows the full extent." The significance of his trust humbled me. "Thank you for telling me. I needed you to understand," he said simply, "who I am, why I am this way." I propped myself up to see his face in the dim light. "I am beginning to," I said softly. "And Adrian? I like who I'm discovering." His smile, tentative, genuine, was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. The article appeared in an industry newsletter first, a seemingly innocuous piece about changing dynamics at literary agencies. Adrian's name appeared in paragraph 3, alongside a subtle insinuation about unconventional management methods and blurred professional boundaries. He dismissed it with characteristic composure. "Industry gossip," he said, setting the newsletter aside. "Hardly worth attention." But 3 days later, a more pointed piece appeared in a popular publishing blog. This one mentioned Adrian by name. In the headline, "Wolf's Den, Inside the Controversial Methods of Publishing's Most Enigmatic Agent." The article quoted anonymous sources describing Adrian's color code system as psychological manipulation and suggesting his relationships with staff crossed ethical lines. "This is deliberate," I said, scanning the piece with growing anger. "Someone's targeting you specifically." Adrian's expression remained calm, but I recognized the tension in his jaw. "It appears so. Who would do this, and why now?" He was silent, for a moment considering several possibilities. "Most likely Malcolm Reed, Red. Because you wouldn't let him bully that debut author?" "Perhaps." Adrian's gaze was distant, calculating. "Or because he sensed our personal connection and is using it as leverage." The implication sent a chill through me. "You think he knows about us?" "He suspects," Adrian corrected. "Malcolm operates on intuition backed by partial information. It makes him dangerous." The situation escalated rapidly. By week's end, 3 potential clients had withdrawn from negotiations, citing concerns about agency culture. A major industry conference rescinded Adrian's invitation to speak on a prestigious panel. Through it all, Adrian maintained his public composure, calm, professional, refusing to engage directly with the rumors. But I saw the toll it took in private moments, the tension headaches, the sleepless nights, the careful calculations as he worked to contain the damage. "We should address this directly," I argued one evening at his apartment. "Issue a statement, correct the misconceptions." "Engaging gives credibility to the accusations," he countered. "Better to let it burn out naturally. And if it doesn't?" He didn't answer, but his expression told me he considered this possibility and had contingencies prepared. The following Monday, I arrived at the office to find Diane waiting by my door, expression grave. "Margot Hayes is in his office," she said without preamble. "Arrived 20 minutes ago." "They've been behind closed doors since, Margot?" Adrian's ex-wife. The woman who'd leveraged that psychological assessment during their divorce. The timing couldn't be coincidence. He didn't mention she was coming, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. It wasn't scheduled. Diane's meaningful look confirmed my suspicions. But she called yesterday, very insistent. I settled at my desk, attempting to focus on work while acutely aware of the closed door across the hall. When it finally opened an hour later, I heard Margot's voice, first confident, slightly amused. Consider my offer, Adrian. It's the cleanest solution for everyone involved. They emerged together, Adrian's expression impassive, Margot looking elegant and satisfied. She noticed me immediately, her smile sharpening. Miss Chun, she greeted. Still assisting Adrian admirably, I see. Miss Hayes, I acknowledged, maintaining professional courtesy. Can I help you with anything? Oh, I think Adrian and I have covered everything necessary. Her gaze shifted between us, assessing, for now. After she departed, Adrian remained in his doorway, expression unreadable. My office, please, he said quietly. Inside, with the door closed, his composure slipped. Slightly. He looked tired, strained in a way I rarely witnessed. Margot's behind the articles, he said without preamble. Working with Malcolm Reed to provide credibility to the claims. Why? I demanded. What does she gain? Control. He moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back. She's offered to help manage the situation in exchange for partial ownership of the agency. That's extortion, I said, anger flaring. You can't seriously be considering it. I'm considering all options. His tone was measured, practical. The agency represents over 100 writers. Their careers depend on our stability and reputation. So, you'd give in to her demands after everything she's done? He turned to face me, expression grave. I'd do whatever necessary to protect my clients and my staff. The nobility of the sentiment was undermined by its implications, including surrendering to manipulation. That doesn't sound like you, Adrian, doesn't it? His smile was sad, self-deprecating. I'm a pragmatist, Olivia, always have been. You're also ethical, I countered. And Margot's approach is anything but. He studied me for a long moment. There's something you should know, he said finally. Something Margot made very clear today. My stomach tightened with apprehension. What? The next article is about you. His voice remained steady, but I saw the concern in his eyes. Your relationship with me, your career advancement, all framed in the most damaging light possible. The revelation hit like a physical blow. She can't possibly have proof. She doesn't need proof. Insinuation is sufficient. His expression softened with regret. I'm sorry, Olivia. I never intended for you to become collateral damage. I'm not a victim in this, I said firmly. I made my own choices. Choices that could damage your professional reputation permanently, he pointed out. This industry runs on perception. Margot knows that better than most. The implication hung between us, unspoken but clear. Our relationship, this connection we'd built so carefully now, threatened both our professional standing. What are you saying? I asked, though I feared I already knew. Adrian hesitated, then spoke with painful honesty. I'm saying we need to consider all options, including whether our personal relationship is sustainable given the circumstances. Though delivered with characteristic calm, the words landed like a blow. You want to end things between us. I want to protect you, he corrected, even if that means for me. That's not your decision to make alone, I said, anger and hurt tangling in my chest. We're both adults who chose this relationship with open eyes. The landscape has changed, he argued gently. The potential consequences have escalated significantly, so we face them together, I insisted. Unless you're using this as an excuse. His expression sharpened. An excuse? to retreat to safety, to avoid the vulnerability we've been building. The accusation struck home. I saw it in the flash of recognition in his eyes. "That's not fair," he said quietly, "isn't it?" I moved closer, refusing to let him retreat behind professional distance. "You've spent your life building systems to protect yourself from emotional risk. Now that we're facing a real challenge, your first instinct is to withdraw." "My first instinct," he countered with unexpected heat, "is to protect you from professional destruction. Your career shouldn't be sacrificed because of your connection to me. That's not your choice to make." I repeated firmly. "It's mine. And I choose as the complex, challenging, worthwhile relationship we've built." Adrian went still, studying me with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see beneath all defenses. "Even knowing the potential cost?" he asked finally. "Even then," I confirmed. "Unless you truly want to end this for your own reasons, if that's the case, be honest enough to say so." The challenge hung between us. For a moment, I feared I'd pushed too far, demanded more vulnerability than he could offer. "I don't want to end this," he admitted finally, voice rough with uncharacteristic emotion. "But I'm afraid of what it might cost you." The honest admission, the willingness to voice fear rather than disguise it as pragmatism, moved me deeply. "Then let's fight back," I said, reaching for his hand. "Together. On our terms, not Margot's." Something shifted in his expression, resolve replacing resignation. "It won't be simple," he warned. "Margot is formidable when challenged. So are we," I countered, "especially you." His fingers tightened around mine, the gesture conveying what words couldn't: gratitude, determination, a commitment to facing this threat as partners rather than separately. "Together, then," he agreed. God help Malcolm Reed when he realizes what he's started. For the first time since the crisis began, I saw the shadow of a genuine smile touch his lips. Adrian Wolfe was many things: controlled, strategic, occasionally frustrating in his emotional containment. But he was also brilliant, ethical, and absolutely relentless when protecting what mattered to him, and somehow, against all odds, I had become something that mattered. Adrian's counteroffensive was methodical, strategic, and entirely unexpected even to me. "I'm calling a staff meeting," he announced the morning after our confrontation. "Everyone, 10 o'clock. In the conference room, faces reflected confusion and concern. The rumors had spread internally, creating an undercurrent of uncertainty. Adrian stood ahead of the table, his composure perfect as always. "You've likely heard rumors," he began without preamble, "about my management methods, about this agency. Some may have seen the articles." A ripple of uncomfortable acknowledgement passed through the room. Rather than address these claims individually, I'm going to do something I should have done years ago. He glanced briefly at me, then continued. "I'm going to explain the color code system and its origins, completely and transparently. For the next 30 minutes. Adrian spoke with remarkable candor, explaining how Thomas Riley's death had prompted him to develop clear communication protocols, how his own experiences with miscommunication had shaped his approach to management. "The system exists to protect you," he concluded, "to ensure that everyone in this agency has a voice, a way to express discomfort or concern without fear of repercussion." The staff listened with rapt attention, many nodding in recognition of a system they'd used but perhaps never fully understood. For the more personal accusations, Adrian continued, his expression carefully neutral. "I have always maintained appropriate professional boundaries, but I recognize that perception matters in this industry." He straightened slightly, decision made. "Therefore, effective immediately, I'm implementing a new organizational structure. Diane will be promoted to Chief Operating Officer, overseeing all day-to-day operations. I'll focus on client representation and strategic direction." The announcement caused surprised murmurs. Diane, seated to his right, appeared as shocked as anyone. This transition has been in planning for some time, Adrian continued smoothly. Recent events simply accelerated the timeline. After the meeting, he called Diane and me into his office, closing the door behind us. "You could have warned me," Diane said, though without real anger. "Would you have accepted if I had?" Adrian countered Dot. She considered this, then shrugged. "Probably not. I hate management, which is precisely why you'll excel at it." His smile was genuine. "You care about the work, not the title." After Diane departed, Adrian turned to me. "You're wondering about your role in this restructuring?" The thought had crossed my mind, I admitted. "I'd like you to become a junior agent," he said simply, "working alongside me but with your own small client list to develop." The offer was so unexpected I couldn't immediately respond. "It removes the direct reporting relationship between us," Adrian explained. "Professionally speaking, you'd answer to Diane, not me," understanding dawned slowly. "You're creating separation, a buffer against the rumors." "I'm creating an opportunity you've earned," he corrected. "The restructuring serves multiple purposes." The strategic elegance was typical, Adrian solving several problems with a single solution, yet something about it troubled me. "And us?" I asked carefully. "Our personal relationship would no longer involve a direct power imbalance." His expression softened slightly, though we'd still need to be discreet. I nodded, processing the implications. "When will you announce this?" "I already have," he said, sliding a tablet across the desk. On the screen was a press release. Time-stamped 30 minutes ago. Wolf Literary announces organizational restructuring. The final paragraph contained my promotion, framed as part of Adrian's long-standing commitment to developing editorial talent. "You were that confident I'd accept?" I asked, unsure whether to be flattered or irritated. "I prepared multiple versions," he admitted. This one reflected my hope rather than my expectation. The candor surprised me. "What about Margot and Reed?" "I've addressed that as well." He retrieved his phone, pulling up an email. "This went to both of them this morning." The message was brief, professional, and unmistakably threatening. It referenced documented evidence of collusion and defamation, and pending legal action unless rectification is immediate. "Do you actually have evidence?" I asked. Adrian's smile was razor thin. "Enough. Margot was careless in her communications with Malcolm, and Malcolm has enemies who owed me favors." The calculated response should have unsettled me. Instead, I found myself admiring its precision, the way Adrian had transformed defense into offense without compromising his principles. "There's one more element to the strategy," he continued, watching me carefully. "Perhaps the most important, which is, I've submitted my name for consideration as the next president of the Publishers Guild." His expression remained neutral, but I sensed the significance of this move. Elections are in 3 months. The Publishers Guild was the industry's most prestigious professional organization, conservative, traditional, and immensely influential. Adrian seeking leadership was a bold, public refutation of the rumors against him. "That's ambitious," I managed, understanding the stakes. "It's necessary," he corrected. "The best defense against insinuation is to make it obviously implausible." The strategy was breathtaking in its comprehensiveness, restructuring the agency, creating professional distance between us, positioning himself for industry leadership. All executed within hours of our conversation. "You've been planning this," I realized. "Since before Margot's visit, I've considered contingencies," he acknowledged. "It's what I do." The personal cost of these changes became gradually apparent. Adrian's campaign for the Guild presidency demanded extensive networking, public appearances, careful image management. Our time together diminished, limited to rare private moments between his increasingly public commitments. My new role brought its own challenges, clients to develop, relationships to build, a professional identity separate from Adrian Wolf's assistant. The transition was both exhilarating and exhausting. 2 months into this new reality, I found Adrian in his office late one evening, reviewing guild election materials. He looked tired, the careful control slightly frayed at the edges. "You're sacrificing a lot for this," I observed from the doorway. He glanced up, a rare flash of vulnerability crossing his features. "It's necessary, is it?" I moved into the room, closing the door behind me. "Or is it another system? Another structure to maintain control?" Instead of the defensive response I half expected, Adrian considered the question seriously. "Perhaps both," he admitted finally. "The strategy is necessary, but my execution may be excessive." The self-awareness in his admission touched me deeply. "You've created professional space for us," I acknowledged, "but we've lost something personal in the process." "A temporary condition," he said, though uncertainty shadowed his eyes. "Once the election is settled, there will be something else," I finished gently. "Another challenge requiring your perfect management." He fell silent, the truth of this observation hanging between us. "I don't know how to do this differently," he admitted finally. "Balance has never been my strength." The confession, simple, honest, without defensiveness, moved me in a way his grand strategies couldn't. This was the real Adrian, not the brilliant strategist or controlled executive, but the man still learning to navigate emotional terrain without maps or systems. "We'll figure it out," I promised, moving around the desk to stand beside him. "Together." His hand found mine, fingers intertwining with quiet gratitude. No further words were needed, just this moment of connection amid the careful structures we built around ourselves. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, innocuous subject line: "Life-changing contents. Miss Chun, following our conversation at the Publishers Summit last month, I am pleased to formally offer you the position of Senior Acquisitions Editor at Atwood Press. As discussed, this role would involve significant editorial autonomy and potential for advancement within our expanding fiction department. The compensation package reflects our high estimation of your talents and industry experience. Details attached. We would require your decision within 2 weeks. Regards, Eleanor Martinez, Executive Editor, Atwood Press." I stared at the screen, conflicting emotions washing over me. Atwood Press was prestigious, smaller than the major houses, but known for literary excellence and innovative approaches. The conversation with Eleanor had been casual, exploratory. I hadn't expected a formal offer, especially at this level. The attached compensation package made me blink twice to ensure I wasn't misreading. The salary was nearly double my current earnings, with benefits and advancement potential clearly outlined. It was objectively an extraordinary opportunity. The kind that appears once in a career, if at all. It was also potentially the end of whatever Adrian and I had built together. I closed the email without responding, trying to process my options. My promotion to junior agent had been fulfilling but challenging. Building a client list from scratch required persistence and patience. This position would leverage my editorial background while providing immediate prestige and security. But it would mean leaving the agency, leaving Adrian, at least professionally. Possibly more. I didn't mention the offer to him immediately. Adrian was consumed with guild election preparations. The vote was just a week away, polls showing him in a tight race against a more traditional candidate. His days were filled with meetings and calls, his evenings with networking events and strategy sessions. Our personal time had dwindled to stolen moments, brief connections between professional commitments. We maintained the separation carefully, our relationship known but not acknowledged within industry circles. 4 days after receiving the offer, I finally broached the subject. We were at his apartment, a rare evening without work obligations. Adrian was more relaxed than I'd seen him in weeks. The perpetual tension temporarily eased. I've received a job offer, I said simply, watching his expression. From Atwood Press, senior acquisitions editor. To his credit, Adrian's reaction was measured surprise, followed by thoughtful consideration rather than immediate opposition. Eleanor Martinez, he said after a moment. I saw you speaking with her at the summit. Of course he had noticed. Adrian, missed very little, especially regarding me. The position is exceptional, he continued, voice carefully neutral. Prestigious house, excellent reputation, strong financial position. Yes, I agreed, waiting for the personal response beneath. The professional assessment, he studied me carefully. You're considering it seriously, not a question. An observation? I admitted. It's an extraordinary opportunity. It is, he agreed without hesitation. You excel there? The immediate support should have been reassuring. Instead, it left me vaguely unsettled. That's all you have to say. Adrian's expression softened slightly. What would you like me to say, Olivia? I don't know, I admitted. Something less rational, less composed. Ah, understanding crossed his features. You want me to ask you to stay? To oppose the move based on personal rather than professional considerations? Put so plainly, it sounded childish, manipulative, yet there was truth in his assessment. Perhaps, I acknowledged. Is that unreasonable? No, he said gently. It's human, but it wouldn't be fair to either of us. He moved to sit beside me, close but not touching. I won't use our personal connection to influence your professional choices. Olivia, that's a boundary I won't cross. The principle was admirable, consistent with everything I knew about him. Yet in that moment, I found myself wishing for less principle and more passion. So you just let me go, without argument? I would support whatever decision you make, he clarified. Because I respect your autonomy. He hesitated, then finished simply, because I care for you. The uncharacteristic near admission hung between us. For Adrian, even this mild expression of feeling represented significant vulnerability. And us, I pressed, if I take this position? Hey, considered this carefully. It would change things, he acknowledged, create new challenges. That relationships survive professional separation all the time. The rational response was exactly what I should have expected. Adrian approached every situation logically, systematically, even matters of the heart. Would you want that? I asked directly. To continue what we have if I leave the agency? For the first time, I saw genuine uncertainty across his features. I want your happiness, he said finally. Your fulfillment, both professionally and personally. That's not an answer. It's the only honest one I can give right now. His gaze was steady, unflinching. I won't make false promises about what might be possible. I won't pretend the separation wouldn't create significant challenges. The candor was painful, but characteristic Adrian preferred difficult truths to comforting falsehoods. I need time to think, I said finally. Of course. He didn't reach for me, respecting the emotional space I'd created. Whatever you decide, Olivia, know that I value what we've built, more than I can adequately express. In the days that followed, I weighed my options carefully. The professional decision seemed clear. Atwood offered advancement, security, prestige. My developing client list at Wolf Literary showed promise, but remained embryonic. Years from real stability, the personal calculation was infinitely more complex. Adrian and I had created something unique, a connection built on honesty, mutual respect, and growing vulnerability. But the foundation remained fragile, the future uncertain. His campaign for guild leadership consumed him. My ambitions pulled me in different directions. Could what existed between us survive professional separation? The physical distance would be minimal. Both companies operated in Manhattan, but the contextual gap would be vast. Different worlds, different circles, different daily realities. 3 days before my deadline to respond, Adrian won the guild election, a narrow victory that nonetheless represented a definitive rejection of the rumors Margot and Reed had circulated. The industry had spoken, affirming Adrian's professional reputation despite the whispers Dot at the celebration gathering. I watched him from across the room, composed as always, but with a quiet satisfaction, visible to those who knew him well. He'd accomplished exactly what he'd set out to do, systematically rebuilding his position through strategic action rather than emotional reaction. It was quintessentially Adrian measured, deliberate, effective. And suddenly, with perfect clarity, I knew my decision. I found him later that evening, after most guests had departed. He stood alone on the venue's terrace, overlooking the city lights. "Congratulations, Mr. President," I said, joining him at the railing. His smile was genuine, unguarded. "Thank you. Though the real work begins now." "It always does," I agreed, gathering my courage. "I've made my decision about Atwood." His expression shifted to careful neutrality, no pressure, no influence, respecting my autonomy completely. "I'm declining the offer," I said simply. Surprise flickered across his features. "May I ask why?" "Because my work at the agency isn't finished," I said truthfully. "Because the clients I've started developing deserve continuity. Because professionally, I believe I can build something more meaningful as an agent than as an editor." He nodded slowly, accepting these reasons without pressing for more. "And personally?" I met his gaze directly. "Personally, I'm not ready to test whether what we've built can survive separation. Not yet. Not when it's still evolving." Something profound passed between us in that moment, understanding, gratitude, a silent acknowledgement of what remained. "Unspoken and glad," he said simply. The words contained volumes, relief, hope, a rare, unfiltered emotional response. As we stood together overlooking the city, I realized my decision wasn't about Adrian, not entirely. It was about the path I truly wanted, the future I could envision most clearly. A future that included him, yes, but also the professional identity I was building, the autonomy I discovered, the strength I'd claimed. For perhaps the first time, I understood exactly what Adrian had been trying to show me all along, that the most meaningful choices are those we make freely, with clear eyes and open hearts. 6 months after declining Atwood's offer, I stood in the doorway of my new office, larger, with a window overlooking Madison Avenue. The nameplate read Olivia Chen, literary agent. Not junior agent, not assistant, just agent. The promotion had come after I signed my 5th client, a brilliant debut novelist whose manuscript had sparked a bidding war among publishers. Adrian had made the announcement with characteristic understatement, a simple email to staff, a brief conversation with me about expanded responsibilities. Our professional relationship had evolved into something resembling a partnership. He still led, still maintained his exacting standards, but increasingly sought my perspective on agency matters. In meetings, he often glanced my way before making decisions, a silent acknowledgement of my growing influence. Our personal relationship had evolved as well, finding balance after the tumultuous events surrounding the guild election. Adrian's leadership position demanded significant time and energy, but he'd grown more deliberate about creating space. For us, protected evenings, occasional weekends away, moments of genuine connection amid professional demands. Most significantly, he'd begun therapy again, not mandated by divorce proceedings or professional crisis, but chosen willingly. "There are patterns I need to address," he'd explained simply. "Systems that no longer serve their purpose." The acknowledgement represented a profound shift. Adrian recognizing that structures designed for protection might now be limiting growth. I was arranging books on my new office shelf when Adrian appeared in the doorway, expression quietly pleased. "Settling in?" he asked, surveying the half-unpacked boxes. "Getting there," I confirmed, though I think I need more shelves. Already arranged, he said with a small smile. Arriving tomorrow. The thoughtfulness was characteristic Adrian anticipating needs, providing solutions without being asked. What had once felt controlling now registered as attentiveness, his way of showing care through practical action rather than emotional declaration. Thank you, I said, meaning more than just the shelves. He seemed to understand, nodding slightly. Dinner tonight? There's something I'd like to discuss. The formal phrasing sent a flicker of apprehension through me. Work-related? No, he said, then hesitated. Personal. My curiosity piqued, I agreed. Your place or out? Mine, he decided. 8 o'clock. Throughout the day, I found myself wondering about his uncharacteristic formality. Adrian was direct by nature. If he wanted to discuss something, he typically simply did so. The scheduled conversation suggested something significant. By evening, my imagination had conjured various scenarios, everything from a relationship ultimatum to a revelation about his therapy progress. None prepared me for what actually awaited. Adrian's apartment was quiet when I arrived, soft classical music playing in the background. He greeted me with a kiss, taking my coat with practiced ease. Wine? He offered, leading me toward the living room, please. As he poured, I noticed subtle changes to the space, new artwork on one wall, fresh flowers on the side table, a soft throw blanket draped over the sofa. Small touches that made the minimalist apartment feel more lived in. You've redecorated, I observed, accepting the wine glass. Made some adjustments, he acknowledged. The space felt too austere. The admission surprised me. Adrian had always preferred clean lines and uncluttered surfaces, claiming they helped him think more clearly. My therapist suggested I consider how environment affects emotional state, he explained, noting my surprise. Whether my preference for minimalism serves practical purposes or avoidance ones, and I prompted gently, the answer appears to be both. His smile was self-deprecating, like most things. We settled on the sofa, the city lights creating a familiar backdrop through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Adrian seemed uncharacteristically hesitant, something clearly weighing on his mind. You mentioned wanting to discuss something, I reminded him after a comfortable silence. Yes, he set his wine glass down carefully. It's about us, our arrangement. The formal terminology sent a chill through me. Arrangement? He recognized his misstep immediately. Poor word choice, our relationship. What about it? I kept my tone neutral, waiting. Adrian considered his next words carefully. These past months have been transformative. For the agency, for me personally. I nodded, sensing more to come. My therapy is focused significantly on patterns of control, he continued. How systems I created for protection became limitations. How structure can be both sanctuary and prison. The insight was profound, Adrian acknowledging the double-edged nature of his carefully constructed world. I've been considering what true partnership might look like, he said, gaze steady on mine. Not just professionally, but personally as well. My heart quickened. Partnership? Yes. He reached for my hand, the gesture deliberate but gentle. I've spent my life creating systems to manage emotional risk, to maintain control when vulnerability felt dangerous. I squeezed his fingers, encouraging him to continue. What exists between us defies those systems, he admitted. It demands something I've never fully offered before, which is, I prompted softly, surrender, he said simply. Not to you specifically, to possibility, to a future I can't completely control or predict. The echo of our earlier conversations about surrender, about power freely given rather than taken, resonated between us. I'm not particularly skilled at this, he acknowledged with a rueful smile, but I'd like to try. With you. From his pocket, he withdrew a small box, Not the velvet jewelry case I have expected, but a wooden one, hand-carved with intricate detail. This isn't a proposal, he clarified, seeing my expression, at least not in the conventional sense. He opened the box to reveal two simple silver keys on a single ring. I've purchased a brownstone in the West Village, he explained. It needs renovation, vision, care. I thought perhaps we might consider it together as a joint project, a shared space. The offer stunned me not just for its practical implications, but for what it represented. Adrian Wolfe, who controlled every aspect of his environment, inviting collaboration, offering not just proximity, but genuine partnership. You want us to live together, I clarified, to create a home together? Yes, his gaze remained steady, vulnerable in a way I'd rarely witnessed. Not immediately, not until we've designed it together, made it ours rather than mine. The distinction was significant. Adrian deliberately surrendering his natural inclination to plan and control every detail. It's a substantial commitment, he acknowledged. One I wouldn't suggest, if I wasn't certain. Certain of what? I asked, needing to hear him say it. His expression softened, the careful control yielding to something more open, more genuine. Of you, he said simply, of us, of what we've built and what we might create together. Not a declaration of love, in conventional terms. Something more profound from a man who approached emotion with such deliberate care, a commitment to shared future, to genuine partnership, to the vulnerability of building something together. May I think about it? I asked, though my heart had already decided. Of course, he said without hesitation. Take whatever time you need. I studied his face in the dim light, the sharp angles softened by affection, the careful composure tempered by genuine vulnerability. I don't need time, I decided, setting my wine glass beside his. Yes, relief and joy crossed his features, subtle but unmistakable. Yes, I confirmed, moving closer, to partnership, to possibility, to surrender. His kiss conveyed what words couldn't: gratitude, hope, a promise of things to come. When we finally separated, his expression held a peace I'd rarely seen. There's no color code for this, he said softly, no system or protocol. Just us figuring it out together. I think that's the point, I replied, understanding at last what we've been building toward all along. Not the absence of structure, but the creation of something uniquely ours. Something that honors boundaries while allowing for growth. Balance, he suggested. Structure with flexibility. Safety with possibility. Exactly. I smiled, recognizing the rightness of his framing, the balance we both need. As we sat together in comfortable silence, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here, from that first unusual interview to this moment of shared commitment. The path had been neither simple nor straight, marked by challenges both external and internal. Yet somehow, through honesty and persistence, through conflict and reconciliation, we'd created something extraordinary, a connection that honored our individual natures while encouraging growth beyond established patterns. Not perfect, not without future challenges, but real, authentic, and entirely ours. And in the end, that was the most profound surrender of all, to accept that love wasn't a system to be managed or a problem to be solved, but a journey to be embraced with all its unpredictable twists and unmapped territories. A journey we would navigate together, eyes open, hearts willing, finding our own unique balance between structure and freedom, control and surrender, safety and risk, finding at last the green that lived beyond all systems.